The White House has repurposed COVID.gov into the origins of the lab leak. Now, that alone is what's being reported. But when you start to read through it, what gets interesting is that it appears to me that they're gearing up public support for the prosecution of Anthony Fauci, or at least they're trying to create this perception that he is culpable for what happened during the COVID lockdowns. The first half of this report largely just talks about things Fauci lied about, and then abruptly shows the pardon of Fauci from Joe Biden, which, of course, Donald Trump has said was void already. Interesting. We'll go through this. Maybe I'm wrong, but we will. Then we've got the story that won't go away. Abrego Garcia, many of you may have seen that Democrat senator went down to go meet with them. And I got to say, it's largely backfiring. More than half the country wants all illegal immigrants deported. Even Newsweek pointed out that 54%, according to Echelon, want all the illegal immigrants deported, and they largely don't care about the intricacies of Abrego Garcia's case. So when Democrats go down there and they dedicate everything to defending an MS-13 gang member, it doesn't help. It just makes things worse. Interestingly, in one of these stories, his wife on TV goes dead silent when asked about how he beat her mercilessly. And in a photograph, she covered up what appears to be his gang tattoos. We got a lot to talk about. Cash Patel and Dan Bongino announced they arrested a guy who was terrorizing Tesla dealerships. And you got a guy from the New York Times calling for an uprising against Donald Trump. It is getting weird out there. But before we get started, my friends, we got some great sponsors for you tonight. We're starting off with Hillsdale College. Constitution 101, the meaning of history and the Constitution. Make sure you guys go to hillsdale.edu/Tim to enroll for free. Have you guys ever heard someone say, either in a clip or on TV, or just someone you know, something like, quote, capitalism is evil? How do you respond? And when did capitalism become so controversial? Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. That's right, free. Learn about the United States Constitution, the stories in the book of Genesis, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church with Hillsdale College free online courses. Hillsdale recently launched a new course, Understanding Capitalism, that you should definitely check out. In 7 lectures, you'll learn about the role of profit and loss, how human nature plays a role in our economic system, why capitalism depends on private property rights, the rule of law, and above all, freedom, and why capitalism is ultimately a system that encourages morality rather than undermines it. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/Tim to enroll in this course, Understanding Capitalism. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. Once again, that's hillsdale.edu/Tim. Look, it's free. That's amazing. Don't forget to pick up some Cash Brew coffee. Don't forget to also smash that like button. Share the show with everyone you know. We've got a full panel of amazing people tonight. We got angry cops hanging out.
I'm so angry.
Who are you?
I'm just a random guy from the internet that you brought along to be a smartass, and here I am.
He was making jokes, and I was like, let's just tell him to sit in the chair.
Yeah, just have me sit in a chair and say stupid things around smart people. That's pretty much my job. Surrounded by smart people, and I say dumb things that make them want to keep me around.
What if you're in court, though?
I still do that. I just get a look from the
So
from
you
the
are
prosecution.
you are an angry cop yourself.
I'm an angry cop myself. I'm a detective out of the city of Buffalo in our Special Victims Unit, and I'm a reserve U.S. Army drill sergeant.
Wow, so you're doing it all. And YouTuber.
I don't like to brag, but I am really cool.
Tiffany's back. What's going on?
I'm just excited to be here again, guys. I have so much fun when I come out here. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm a small business advocate. I regularly testify before Congress, the FTC, and I help fundraise for small businesses, fighting off big corporations that are trying to shut them down.
Of course, Andrew Branca is here as well.
Yes, I'm an attorney and a member of the Supreme Court Bar whose expertise is use of force law. I have a wonderful book I give away for free, How to Be Hard to Convict if you're ever compelled to defend yourself, your family, or your property. Get this for free at lawofselfdefense.com/Tim. And I have a wonderful YouTube channel as well, Law of Self-Defense.
And Libby's here.
I'm Libby Emmons. I'm here. Glad to be with everybody. I'm with the Post Millennial, and we can get started.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen, from the White House itself. Look at this. Whitehouse.gov, lab leak true origins of COVID-19. And right here is this interesting photo of Fauci touching his forehead where it shows the grant of clemency from Joseph R. Biden. And it says a full and unconditional pardon for any offenses against the United States which he may have committed or taken part in from January 1st, 2014. Now, the reason that's interesting is that this is the repurposed COVID.gov, which highlights the lab leak origins. It goes on to basically say, here are the origins. Here's the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the wet market. But what I find really interesting is that it basically goes through how Fauci, and with his funding through Peter Daszak into the Wuhan lab, they were doing gain-of-function research. It even says a lab-related incident involving gain-of-function research is the most likely origin. They mention the NIH failures. They then show Fauci's pardon, and then they go to show obstruction, lying. They mention New York obstruction. They mention how they say mask mandates. There was no evidence. There was no evidence for lockdowns or social distancing. My view of this, the only reason you do this is that you are prepping the public for some kind of enforcement action. They don't need to repurpose and create an entire, I mean, they designed this has got code and graphics and everything. They want public perception on this issue. They showed Donald Trump. Now, I don't know if we'll ever actually see arrests of people who we feel did wrong at any point in time in the previous administration or otherwise. I mean, Fauci was working in the Trump administration. That being said, the rumor is come summertime, we will see some kind of arrests. I don't know if you guys agree with that or believe we'll see anything like that, but what do you think?
One thing I'll mention, of course, is a pardon does not protect you from civil action.
Yes.
There's no reason the federal government can't be suing this guy for fraud, malfeasance, and all the probably trillions of dollars of damages he caused to the American people. The other thing is the pardon power, of course, is a core and plenary power of the Article II executive branch, the president, the only branch of government where the entire authority, the executive authority, is endowed on one single individual. The pardon's only legitimate if it's backed by that single individual's will. They chose to do that. If I do a pardon, it doesn't count. If you do a pardon, it doesn't count. But we don't know for a fact that Joe Biden willed this pardon because it was done by an auto pen. And there's no other evidence to suggest he even knew this pardon was being issued. And if it wasn't by his will, it has no more authority than if I issued it or Tim issued it.
There's also that super sketchy video where they asked him about the pardons and he said he had no idea what they were talking about.
Really?
Yeah, there's like this, it's very off the cuff. It was like when they were asking him questions as he was walking by and they were trying not to let reporters talk to him. He says, I don't know what you're talking about. And
He did not sign those pardons.
if you,
don't believe
I mean, he didn't sign, I mean, we don't have a wet signature on almost anything at all
By the way,
during the last
if
2 years.
if they used an auto pen and he says, yes, I authorize the auto pen, that's legit. That's
Yeah,
fine. He doesn't
that
have to
counts.
sign it personally. The problem is we don't have that connection
Yeah.
between his will and the use of the auto pen. And we know it was being accessed by a variety of people.
So you just mentioned what immediately I went to, which is that a pardon doesn't protect you from anything civil. And I would not think it out of the realm of possibility given Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s track record of outright disdain for Anthony Fauci and his book, The Real Anthony Fauci, which most of those talking points were almost taken letter for letter from. I would not be shocked if they started posting documents here that could help the civil cases to start.
And also
That would not
worth
shock me.
reminding people, Anthony Fauci was the highest paid government official for many, many, many years, more than the president, more than anybody else in government.
Yep.
He's getting a huge amount in retirement now, too, right?
Sure.
He had 3.5 million the first year.
Yeah.
Retired?
Retired. But they said that some of that money overlapped while he was still working and he wasn't supposed to. There was just an article, what was it in? There was an article that came out earlier today, like 5-6 hours ago, where they said that it looks like maybe there was some failure to disclose that he wasn't quite retired and was already accepting money.
It sounds like gain of pension research.
That's clever.
Well, he lied to Congress. I would say now with the White House asserting they were doing gain of function research. I mean, we've got contradictory statements from Fauci in court saying outright, we did not do this.
Yeah, he was very clear on that. He was very clear that they weren't doing gain of function research. And also he was, doubling down on all of these mandates and requirements, the 6-foot thing, the mask thing. And then when books started coming out, what was it? Dr. Deborah Burke's book came out and it was revealed that the 6-foot thing was just
Made an arbitrary measurement.
what they were doing since the Middle Ages or something. It's like, it was just always been 6 foot. So we never really questioned
They
it.
just made
Half a
bunch of
horse
stuff
length.
up.
Right. I mean, I guess there's that thing where you bury bodies 6 feet underground so that bacteria doesn't come up. But between people, that's not really the same kind of
Well,
thing.
one of my favorite things was the double masking, which you watch it emerge in the media. First, someone randomly and arbitrarily asked Dr. Fauci, if a mask protects you, wouldn't 2 masks be better? And he shrugged it off like, I don't know. And then the media started running with 2 masks are better. And then once it got reported that 2 masks were better, Fauci just agreed with it.
And he started wearing 2 masks.
Yep.
My favorite mask, though, had to have been Alyssa Milano's crocheted
the knit
mask.
one.
You have a favorite mask?
That was my favorite one because she took a selfie of her and her family in their car, and they were all masked up. And she was like, "I made mine," and everyone was like, "You realize there's holes in it?"
Because she's secretly based.
Yeah, well,
She's
wasn't-
letting
she's
it slide.
secretly, not so secretly, an idiot.
The truth is there are holes in all masks of varying sizes, and that just showed they didn't actually care if they worked or not. It was just put something on your face.
No.
One of the things that
Yeah.
was really hard, like I ran a small business that was shut down by my county for 17 months. And I owned a gymnastics business for kids, and we had to repurpose our business. We were going to lose everything. We did lose everything.
Did you
that
bend
what
over
propelled
backwards
you?
to keep it open?
We weren't allowed. We were fully shuttered. Larry Hogan actually, his wife's family has investments in martial arts, so they were given the only exception in our state. All other sports, all recreation was closed down. But
Is
our
that what
county
propelled you into being a small business advocate?
part of it, yeah, that's a big part of it. And so we were shut down for 17 months, second longest closure in the United States, in my tiny little county, just right down the street from here. And during that time frame, we had to go to being a virtual school. So we went from being a gymnastics facility to a virtual school where kids would bring their laptops in, and we were only allowed to have 18 of them. And no matter what their ages were, we had to put siblings in the same pod, which was so unsafe. We had 3-year-olds alongside 11 and 12-year-olds. And when they had to go to play in the gym, they had to be together. Not safe. My insurance hated it, right? When they had to go to art class, they were together, but they weren't anywhere near the same skill set. And what would happen was they repurposed all the health department inspectors that were doing restaurants before us, and they would come in and harass the kids. And they would come over and ask, "Do you have a brother or sister here?" We had to let them. Like they would come in and they would say they would shut us down by force if we didn't let them come in and interrogate children to make sure they didn't have siblings in the room. Our kids suffered, and all these
Well,
small
that's another
businesses
Fauci
suffered.
thing. That's another Fauci thing. Is all of the kids suffered
Yep.
across the entire
All the kids
country
suffered. It's
who were in
tragic.
who were in schools with masking and everything else, and there was no real evidence to suggest. And this came up repeatedly. There was no real evidence to suggest that kids were vectors of this illness at all. I think that I don't know about revoking pardons necessarily of a previous administration. It
Can
does
you
seem-
revoke a presidential pardon?
I don't. It is pretty much unprecedented.
Yeah.
It's happened, I think, twice.
Give me those examples.
Yeah. So I believe at one point I went all through this a while ago when Trump first said he was revoking pardons, but it happened twice. One, George W. Bush revoked a pardon that he had given himself.
Okay.
And that was different, and he revoked that pardon. And I believe Ulysses S. Grant revoked a pardon. And in both cases, these pardons were revoked before the pardonee had received the pardon. So that ended up being the determining factor that pardons were eligible for revocation. Under the George Bush case, it was because he had given a pardon to someone who then it turned out
So it
that
wasn't-
guy's dad gave a ton of money to the GOP, and he was like, it looks dodgy.
Isaac Tusi, was that the story? The 2008 George W. Bush was
Yeah.
granting a pardon to a man
Yeah.
named Isaac Tusi, but then revoked it the next day.
Yeah, I don't think one president can revoke another president's pardon if the pardon was given with authority, if it's legitimate.
If he actually knew it was happening and it wasn't somebody just stuck it in the machine and walked it out.
Yeah, but then how do you prove that?
I mean, that's the thing, right? How do you prove that? You would need like a whistleblower from inside that was a part of it, or you would need to be able to question a former president, which is really difficult to do.
Especially when it's one that's mentally retarded.
Well, and then the issue comes up, I think the
Infirm.
auto pen
Say
thing.
infirm.
Sorry,
He's
when he's
geriatrically
mentally
infirm.
infirmed.
I think the auto pen thing is interesting. I was talking to someone on post-millennial staff who had previously been a congressional staffer, and he said that the senator he worked for often authorized use of the auto pen, but that was a direct authorization.
Right.
Like that was very specific.
Or they just leave it political. They don't try to make it actionable. They don't try to actually get rid of this pardon, but they just make the whole world know that, hey, the Democrats had a guy in office for 4 years who is not mentally competent.
This is a problem that is much, obviously when it's the president, this is a huge problem, but this is just like, a direct connection to when they had Dianne Feinstein literally on death's door, wheeled down to vote. And they're saying, say aye. And she goes, aye what, dear? And they're like, say aye. And she goes, I would like to. And they're like, say aye. And she couldn't. And then the aide reaches across and goes, aye. And they counted her vote. She didn't know what she was voting on.
Or there was the woman in Texas over the summer, the lawmaker who was in a old folks home, and so she hadn't been shown
In the
up for
dementia
Congress.
ward. Yes.
Yeah.
By the way,
This is a problem.
You see how Trump signs his executive orders, like those first couple days in
those
office?
big
He had the
Sharpies.
giant stack of them, right?
Yeah.
He signs them on camera,
Yep.
in person, with a big pen.
And he loves the
Because
ceremony.
I
of
bet
it,
he
too.
does that because he's well aware that, because they've always been making claims about his mental competence, right? Unsupported by any evidence. But if he was just auto-penning these executive orders, you don't think they would attack them as not being legitimate?
He also has staff read out what they are.
Yep.
So that everyone hears what they are and he acknowledges what each one is and then he signs it. I think that's actually really smart. The other thing that I think, I don't know what you guys think of this, but it says in this COVID thing, data shows that all COVID-19 cases stem from a single introduction into humans. This runs contrary to previous pandemics where there were multiple spillover events. That I think is extremely damning. And it's very similar to what COVID skeptics were saying for years and were canceled from the internet and from their jobs and everything else for saying.
Except for Jon Stewart, because he was one of them.
Right.
Well, that was really funny how Colbert was going like, when Jon Stewart was like, it's the lab.
Yep.
And Stephen Colbert was dancing around with the people in vaccine costumes.
And the funny thing is, that's the only one most people cite, but he did that several times.
Really?
He had the vax scene was an ongoing segment he did with a bunch of different weird shenanigans where syringes were dancing around. Everyone likes to cite that
Very
one
poor
where they're
taste.
on stage doing the stupid dance. He's got a bunch of them, not just the one.
Mm-hmm.
Are they equally funny?
What's that?
Are they all equally as funny?
They're funny to us, and at some point he's going to argue the intent was to be funny, so he succeeded. He's like, joke's on you. I was only pretending to be retarded, and we're going to be like, oh, okay,
Mentally infirm.
mentally infirm.
Like, we have to understand that our children, like, one of the things that's been really hard looking back on COVID for me is I teach kids. I teach a lot of special needs kids. I teach children. And in our county, all of our test scores tanked. Like, my kids' school went from a 9.5 out of 10 to a 4 out of 10 in that 2-year span of their testing. Most of the kids are now reading 3 grade levels below when they were at level at the time that the pandemic began, right? But one of the things that has been striking is that what we have done is conditioned this entire younger side of the generation that's come up through this to lose their ability to think imaginatively, which doesn't seem like a big deal if you're like, oh, they can't pretend to be a fireman or a police officer, right? But it is a very big deal if you need them to creatively problem solve or innovate. We have literally stunted the ability to innovate because we taught them everything was real. Everything. We taught kids that if you touch your friend, you could die. And if you don't scrub your hands, you could get sick and you could make your grandma die. And if you like breach these protocols, we damaged children in ways that we will not fully see fleshed out for decades, but it will be long-term, like it's going to be catastrophic.
So we had a caller on the Uncensored Call-In show who made a really interesting point about autism rates in kids because RFK Jr. has been talking about this massive spike. And I'm going to paraphrase the general idea because the idea was that what we perceive to be autism in young people today may actually be developmental disabilities caused by tablets. And some people instantly said, BS, there are kids that are 1 or 2 that are showing autism symptoms. So I want to clarify this, but I do think it's important to talk about. We're seeing a massive uptick in autism diagnoses now among very young people, children, over the past 10 years. And while I do think a lot of it is regular old autism, I also think some of it may be developmental disabilities caused by children being handed tablets. And so the idea is basically this. A kid is 1 and cries. How do humans handle that? The human talks to the kid. Yeah, don't shake your babies.
Oh.
That's coming from a cop who said that.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But we largely will talk to the kid, right? So I have a new baby cries, and my wife is saying like, what do you want? I just fed you, and interacting in a normal human way. Parents now put a tablet in front of the kid or the baby and press play. That is not a normal social interaction. So what then happens is in the most formative years of a human's life, when the neural pathways are being built around how a human needs to interact, they've replaced human social interaction with auto-played videos. What do you get? A child that is dissociative, antisocial, that may be similar to autism symptoms that is being diagnosed as it, but it could be technology causing this.
Well, and during COVID, we had kids looking at screens for the full day, for like 6 hours a day, and that's all they had. The other thing you were mentioning, what was going on during COVID with education. And the other thing we taught our kids during that time is that education doesn't matter, right? So it's very hard to pull kids back and say, now it matters what your grades are. Now it matters that you show up for school, even though during COVID, if you were around, this was in Brooklyn, New York, if you were around someone who had COVID, you couldn't go to school for 2 weeks. So we already taught them that education is bogus, that it doesn't matter if you go to school, that it doesn't matter if you learn anything, because they weren't learning anything on the, Chromebooks that got sent home. And so now how do you tell a kid who's entering high school, now education matters, even though we have destroyed your education from 4th grade to the present?
And you use the word stunted for this mental, cognitive, and emotional development.
Yes.
And not only might that be possible, it literally has to be possible.
It has to be.
It has to have happened, because if you took these same children, the same ages, and you put them on a starvation diet for 18 months, they would not physically develop correctly, and they would never get that growth back. You can't get it back. We all know we learn things best at certain ages. And once you've lost that opportunity, you can't teach someone how to read or think or relate in the same way ever again. It's gone forever.
It's I started a new small business because I was so concerned, because one of the things that we saw consistently across all of the drop test scores was this creative problem solving, creative thinking had dropped almost to nothing in all of the kids that were like 1 to 2 all the way up through like 8. And so I built this imagination play center. They can pretend to be a police officer. They can pretend to be a camper. They can pretend to be at a grocery store, whatever, right? I wanted to give that back to my community because everything went out of business during COVID. We lost 37 children's businesses in my small town during COVID. We were one of the only ones that survived. So I built it, and we built it for 8 and under, thinking that was the age I could still impact. I actually thought that was the only age we could help. So we said 8 and under when we opened. Then the first week, my daughter, who's 12, had all her little friends roaming the mall because it's in a shopping mall. They were all out in a pack, and she comes to me and she says, Mom, on her walkie-talkie, and she says, Mom, can we come hang out at the Grove? And I'm like, yeah, but you guys are kind of old, and you know my tech rule. It's no tech in here, so your friends will have to hand over their cell phones. She said, that's okay. These 12 and 13-year-olds come in. They give me all their cell phones, and like 9 of them go into my little doctor's office, my little bakery, my little grocery store. They spend about 1 minute afraid someone's going to make fun of them. And then they spent the next 6 hours just pretending. And I asked them at the end to come sit with me and tell me like what they thought, why it was fun. And they said they stole this from us. We didn't have any of this. I want to do this. This was fun. We never got to do this. This age group that was supposed to be learning to use their imaginations and develop innovation and flourish, we denied that to them. And this is not, in my opinion, a partisan issue. Every parent in America knows what we did in this regard. This is not a partisan issue. I see it everywhere. I see it with every age of kid from like 14 on down. I see the high schoolers in a different way. We're stunted socially. There's a lot more anxiety, right? We see these problems, but for the young kids up to that like tween age, they were denied the ability to develop the type of imagination skills necessary to innovate. And as a country, we will pay for that.
Yeah,
we will pay for that.
If space aliens had come to Earth and done this to us, we would consider it an act of war and eradicate them from the universe. But we're supposed to pretend it's okay because our own government officials did it.
Well,
Yeah.
Trump started it. And I will give credit to the Republican states that started to back away from it. But the response from the left in terms of all the lockdowns is these liberals have been posting, oh, wow, we better get to the bottom of who initiated the lockdowns and who was in charge of the administration when these policies were being put in place. It's why a lot of libertarians didn't like Trump. Because he was the boss and he let Fauci and Birx kind of just do their thing.
But it was impossible. There was like a giant train running away down the rails downhill. There was no way President Trump would have been able to stop that and survive politically.
I don't give the excuse. I don't waive it.
He also trusted institutions, right? I mean, Trump's
He's not a doctor.
full hatred of institutions didn't come until after they tried to destroy him fully. So I think that's part of it as well.
I'll also say, like, I absolutely have a huge problem with all of the things that Trump and then Biden did during COVID that destroyed small businesses and children.
That was going to be
They
my
closed
point.
our
If they want to go
churches.
after Trump for what he did, how could you not then go after Biden?
You have to go after both. They both shut down We literally selectively shut down the world for 505 days, and in that same time frame of destroying millions of small businesses that never came back, the backbone of our economy, we created 551 new billionaires. And ask how much money Google made off of all of the Chromebooks they sold that our government subsidized.
Yeah.
Ask how much they chose the winners and losers of our economy. Okay,
Tiffany,
they
don't
did
you
that.
think
And
that
these podcasters, I'll tell you got to watch out for those guys. They
Saying
made a
whatever
lot of
they
money.
want.
Don't you think,
That's right.
though, Tiffany, that the government really stepped up and made sure to make millions of people reliant on government funds during that time? Wasn't that
It
a
feels
big
like
help?
they stepped up and made us reliant on everything. And
Yeah, that was their
like,
whole point.
And it was both parties. This was not a one party. This was a power thing. This was not a party thing. This was a power thing. And
they
once
wanted
that party
to make
got there, they
people
kept it.
subservient on
Yeah.
government. Yeah.
To rise up against law enforcement, the rule of law, so then they could push back and not have like any sort of deterrent when they overthrow the United States. Go on.
And then they rioted and firebombed the White House grounds and St. John's Church, and they got away with it.
Another
we didn't get any
facet.
commissions. We didn't get any hearings.
Another
on the-
facet here, of course, is traditionally when we had high rates of employment growth, it came from small business. It didn't come from big corporations. We obliterated the small business. We obliterated the source for those job growth. When Biden wanted to increase job numbers, what did he do? Every job he created was a government job.
Yep.
That's why there's tens of thousands of people available. They're still on probationary employees to be fired by Trump.
A lot of people don't know this, but I'm actually the public policy liaison for the American Small Business League. And the statistics people find most shocking that we use all the time is that in the last 25 years, 99.9% of all jobs created in this country were created by small businesses because big corporations only develop efficiencies to increase productivity with less labor. They destroy jobs while small businesses create them and cultivate them. And in the same token, same statistic, 99.9% of all businesses in this country are small businesses, but they're the ones that we sacrificed, and we chose the billionaires that were paying the big lobbying dollars, and they got to stay open.
Let's clarify. Nobody chose that. They stole it from us.
They stole it.
It was the largest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich in the history of humanity. Absolutely insane.
Absolutely.
The amount of money that was given in like pharmaceutical grants, the amount of money that was given to big box stores, they would shut. Famously, there was a photo from a Walmart that was open, but they closed the gardening section.
Yeah.
You could go to the Walmart, buy whatever you want. You couldn't buy gardening stuff. It made no sense. Small businesses couldn't be open at all. They created special exemptions only for the big box stores.
Yep.
Here's what most people, I think most people understand, but for younger people, if you own a restaurant and you're a famous burger joint, you got burgers and you got wings, you're going to have $10,000 to $20,000 worth of food product at any given moment. They say 2 weeks to slow the spread. And Donald Trump did. He's the one who started this.
Yep.
That 2 weeks, your food is spoiled.
Yep.
You just lost 20 grand. You can't
Yep.
sell it. Now, with the Biden administration coming in, they did 2 years to slow the spread.
And your insurance, though, doesn't cover it because it's act of God. So these guys couldn't make any insurance claims either on anything that happened.
Instantly.
It turns out they should get that back because it was actually act of the NIH.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an act of
But
God, as it
overnight,
turns out.
there were tons of restaurants that lost $20,000 or $30,000 in product. That money instantly evaporated. So when they said, no, we're going to reopen, your business should be fine. The owner said, I don't have 30 grand to buy the food to be able to serve anybody food.
Tim, first of all, the federal government absolutely knows how to run your business better than you do. So how dare you?
You know, one of the things that happened, though, and this is a big boon for all of the big banks during this time, is that the SBA activated EIDL loans. These are disaster relief loans for every state in America, as long as your governor instituted a state of emergency. And then suddenly, like, I was a debt-free business. I had worked so hard to stay debt-free and build my business from the ground up. And I was forced to take out a $250,000 loan to survive. And they gave those loans to everyone. Okay, but they were given by banks that then repackaged them and sold off that debt. And let me tell you, that's sitting out there in a whole bunch of CLOs right now. These are the only loans simultaneously that our SBA does not publish the metrics on for how many of them have defaulted because they just handed them out like this. There was so much fraud that happened during COVID. And like go to franchises, which I was a franchise. Franchisors used the SBA during that time like a money printing machine, including my favorite, always private equity-backed franchisors, forced us to take out loans. They were like, you will take out these loans and you will keep paying us while like landlords and stuff were giving us breaks, right? And so the SBA turned into a money printing machine. The banks were the ones that got to hand out all that cash, but it was guaranteed by the government. They knew that most of us weren't going to survive. The government is now paying off all those loans because they guaranteed the loans.
There's a lot of people you'll see on the DOJ. The DOJ is prosecuting people for COVID PPE loans and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was a trap the whole time. I was
for sure.
There's such thing as free lunch. And so when this was going on, I was being advised by my legal team. They were like, hey, you should apply for these loans. And I was like, why? And they were like, well, the government's giving it to everybody to make sure they stay afloat. And I was like, we don't need it. And they're like, you really should take it. I was like, we don't need it at all. And they're like, I think it'd be smart. I was like, why are you telling me to take money I don't want and don't need? No. And they were like, okay. I was creeped the F out.
Why were they telling you? Did you ever figure that out? Were they getting kickbacks or something?
No, I don't know. The argument made was like everybody's hurting right now. The money is available and it can be forgiven. Use it to pay your staff. And I was like, my company's actually making money right now. I am not touching PPE loans. Goodbye.
The lobbyists fought so hard. There was so much advertising money poured into it, though, because this money was printed by the government and handed out by the banks, and the banks just got the money passing through, and they got all of these transaction processing fees. They made huge money, and I am guilty. I had to take the PPP loans. We were shut down for 17 months. We were not surviving, and I didn't get my first grant for a year. I did get a grant. Not nearly the like level of grants that other people got, but I got a small grant. And then I ultimately had to, after a year passed, I had to take a loan. My franchisor made me. So I had to take out a loan. But we were debt-free businesses. So many businesses were debt-free. But you have a personal guarantee on your lease. So you got to pay it. You've got a personal guarantee because small businesses don't get the benefit of LLC protection like big businesses do.
Let's jump to this next story from the Post-Millennial. Kilmar Abrego Garcia's wife covers up his MS-13 gang member. Well, I'm going to say this. Covers the MS-13 gang tattoos on his hands. Now, the title says covers his hand tattoos with hearts in social media post. However, Libby also recently just shared this. Trump out. He's posted it. This is MS-13. Take a look. This is where it gets really interesting. First, here you can see in his hand, it looks like a marijuana leaf, a smiley face, a cross, and a skull. When his wife shared this photo, she covered his hand up with hearts because those tattoos are MS-13 gang tattoos. Donald Trump has the image. He says, this is the hand of the man the Democrats feel should be brought back to the U.S. because he is such a fine and innocent person. They said he is not a member of MS-13, even though he's got MS-13 tattooed on his knuckles. And 2 highly respected courts found he was a member of MS-13, beat up his wife, etc. I was elected to take bad people out of the U.S., among other things. I must be allowed to do my job, make America great again. In this image, you can see the marijuana is M, the smile is S, the cross is 1, and the skull is 3. Now, the only question I have is, I understand MS1, but what about the 3? How is the skull a 3? Do we understand
Just
that?
the curve in the side of the skull would be like...
Makes a 3?
Yeah.
3 holes, eyes and nose.
I think it's that
Perhaps.
if you just take off the left side that it creates the
A 3?
I don't know. I think that's what they're...
So, I mean, marijuana smiley is MS, and the cross is a 1. And they all did have tattoos like this on their hands. Now, the reporting from gang unit, like gang officers and a DA who appeared on Fox is that they've moved away from tattoos and are because it makes you easily identifiable and prosecutable. But ladies and gentlemen, I can't believe we even have to have this conversation. I know that every single person listening right now knows this already. The guy was MS-13.
Well, the sting where he was arrested in 2019 outside of a Home Depot, that was part of an investigation into gang activity in the area. He wasn't just picked up for loitering.
A Hispanic person was arrested outside of a Home Depot?
3 of them.
I don't believe you.
And didn't they say it was because they were looking for work?
Yeah, people have said that it was because
day
they were
laboring.
looking for work. But it was, I mean, the police arrested him because they were investigating gang activity in the area. They were already under surveillance.
I mean, come on. Like, the marijuana smiley face is clearly MS. Is there an argument they're going to have to why he has comparable gang tattoos to MS-13, which spells out at least MS-1?
He's got multiple sclerosis. He loves Jesus, and he'll go to the grave believing that. I don't see why any of you would say this young man who's obviously having trouble going to school and needs a job hanging outside of Home Depot would be anything other than a fantastic addition to the United States population. Racism. Stop
Have you encountered any stuff like this in your line of work?
No, the city of Buffalo doesn't it has a majority of local gangs. So like block gangs, like we've got Bailey Avenue, so you got the Bailey Boys and stuff like that. Bang them, fuck them, leave them. But we do have old heads in the gang. That's one of the gangs.
Old heads?
An old head is an older individual that's been in the gang life for a while. So like say like 25 and older. And we'll have
That
old
sounds like young. That's a young person.
gang life's hard life.
Yeah, it seems tough.
If you make it to 25.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
you've been in the game for a minute because they'll start at like 15, 16. So by the time you get to 25, you've got half of your retirement in. It's 10 years.
Yeah, wow.
So we'll have old heads that, like I said, are older people that have been in the streets for a while, and they'll rep. They'll be the OG for like a block gang, but they'll be Bloods. So a specific example that I can think of is there was an old head. He was a Blood, is a Blood, and he takes these 2 or 3 smaller block gangs under his wing. They don't battle with one another. They're friendly with one another, and they don't work for him, but he guides them. And he also has connections to
He's
other
like the
blood
Godfather.
groups. Kind of like the Godfather, and like a smaller aspect for like just that portion of town.
The 5 blocks is the 5 families.
In
Yeah.
Chicago, all the gangs are Catholic.
What's that?
In Chicago, not all, but like most of the gangs are Catholic.
Is that like an old
Really?
Irishy type thing?
There's the popes, the bishops, the disciples. I'm not kidding. And there's a
Seriously.
yes. And I don't know if they're actually Catholic, but my friends were always making that joke, like what's next? The choir boys? Like, why are they all
Church
Catholic?
loves violence.
It does. And then there's different sects of each. So there are different popes. The popes are a gang, and there's a bunch of different ones. And the bishops, and the Latin kings are obvious. They're more national, and that's not so religious, but they are all largely Christian. I do find that really interesting about the MS-13 with like the cross. Like these guys largely purport to be Christian, don't they?
They follow, or they like pray to like the weird saint, like the Saint de la Muerte or something like that. It's like the saint of death, and it's this overseeing saint that like understands criminals and works with criminals. It's a load of horseshit. It's like voodoo funky bullshit.
Someone says the skull in Spanish is craneo, which starts with C, the third letter in the alphabet. Is that it?
Maybe.
Well, personally, I'd like to see Trump get FAFO tattoos on each of his hands. That would be pretty cool if he showed up with that.
ChatGPT could do that for you.
AI for that right now.
And by the way, a couple of issues here. One is the question of whether he's MS-13 has been answered. So they talk all about the due process this guy was supposed to get. He got every drop of due process he was entitled to. And part of due process
much. He
is
got
also
too much.
So many processes.
Part of due process is also finality of law. A decision has been made. It's over. And this decision was made by 2 different courts in 2019. An immigration judge, before which this guy appeared with a lawyer, had the opportunity to rebut this evidence that he was MS-13. He failed to do that. Then he appealed to an appellate board for the immigration, and that judge also adjudicated him MS-13. It's over. We're not going back and asking the same question over and over again endlessly.
What do Democrats expect to have happened? Someone to
They want it to go away.
They
want
trial.
It's like a dead unicorn in the road, and they just want it to be alive again. They just don't like the situation. It's not to their satisfaction.
Well,
they want it changed.
I think what they really wanted was they wanted to bring 10 million people into the United States and keep them here forever.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why they had varying legal statuses for all of these people, refugees, asylum seekers, all this. You're an attorney. I have this question. So I was doing a little digging into what could cause a person to get, how a person could be deported without like a whole court thing, right?
Right.
And so it's
Which is not what happened here, by
No,
the way.
that's not what
Okay.
happened here. But it said that asylum seekers, if your case is dismissed or denied, then you are eligible for deportation. Joe Biden in last June quietly dismissed 350,000 asylum seekers cases. There's a backlog of about 2 million cases. Could the Trump administration just dismiss all of these asylum cases and then deport everybody who's on that backlog?
Well, what they could do is everybody's entitled to due process, even these guys. Even the TDA guys under the Alien Enemies Act are entitled to due process. But what due process means is not the same for everybody. The due process I'm entitled to as an American citizen before I can be deported from the country is very, very high. The amount of due process someone who's here on an asylum basis or a temporary basis or a parole basis or a completely unlawful basis is very, very, very low. That's why we have immigration courts. Congress said, we don't want these immigration immigration cases going through our federal district trial courts. We don't want that. It just blocks up the whole system. We're going to take that jurisdiction away from the federal district trial courts and assign it to specialized immigration courts. So first of all these immigration cases, the district courts have no jurisdiction over them. They're in the wrong place. And when
like
they're in
Boasberg and what's her name in Boston,
yes,
that's the wrong place.
Yes. And the immigration courts are allowed to do things in a much more accelerated way. For example, these don't have to be individualized hearings. You could bring in 100 MS-13 guys, and the government could hold up a piece of paper and say, yes, we've determined that each of these is an MS-13 people subject to deportation. Bam, they're all gone. It doesn't have to be an individualized hearing. So you can do it in an accelerated way. In this particular case, one really outrageous part of this is this guy was deported on March 15th. His family didn't even file anything in court, in federal district court, until March 24th, 9 days later. By then, he had been in El Salvador for 9 days. The United States has zero jurisdiction over that guy the moment he's been returned to El Salvador. So everything that's happening in federal district court with respect to this guy is completely lawless. Courts do not have infinite and unlimited authority and jurisdiction.
Wouldn't this be a lack of standing or something?
It's a lack of jurisdiction. So the first thing a court is supposed to ask itself when a dispute is presented to it is, do I, as the court, even have the jurisdictional authority to hear this case? This is an El Salvadoran citizen who's in El Salvador.
What if he was an American? They'd have jurisdiction over the American citizen, right?
But he's not an American citizen.
No, my argument is, if an American citizen got deported to El Salvador like Democrats are whinging about, courts would have jurisdiction because
the U.S. government has jurisdiction over American citizens.
Yes.
You can look at the types of things that we're doing with prisoner exchanges with Russia when we're trying to get out what we believe are politically held prisoners over there. We can't make Russia, through a court order or any other means, release them to us. That's a fact. We have to go through other negotiation means to get somebody back, whether it's a journalist or a basketball player or, a supposed spy, whatever they say, right? But we can't force them to.
I want to jump to this next story. So we have this clip from ABC of Abrego Garcia's wife. And I'm not gonna bury the lead. I'm gonna say it right off the bat. I believe this woman is under duress in everything she's doing. I believe my views on this is completely reasonable. Let me play this clip for you, and then I will lay out my argument.
Have to ask it. You did take out a temporary order of protection against your husband in 2021. Were you in fear of your husband?
Husband is alive. That's all I can say.
What?
Okay, and I'm not going to push on that apparently. But how much hope?
That was a ridiculous non-answer. I believe that his wife's under duress. Let me lay this out. In 2021, she files a petition for protection on domestic violence accusations. She says that he's punched her, mercilessly beaten her, given her a black eye. All of a sudden, she stops following through with it. What could possibly be the reason for a woman to claim that this guy, who has been accused of human trafficking, who has MS-13 gang tattoos, who is believed by 2 courts to be an MS-13 gang member, why would she abruptly just decide, you know what, these multiple beatings he's given me, I've worked it out? Well, you're a cop.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question.
This is my expertise.
If you went to, if you got a report from someone saying, I just watched a guy beating his wife, and you went to the house, knocked on the door, and the woman said, no, everything's fine, what would you do?
That's a good what if. Does she have like visible bruising?
She got a black eye.
Arrest the dude. I got to get a statement from the guy that saw it happen.
But she said it's fine.
Doesn't matter.
She said nothing happened.
New York State domestic violence laws say that I have to separate the 2 parties, and if I get the witness, I got to take them apart.
Now, there's a reason why that law exists. In your experience, was she fine?
No.
This is the point I'm bringing up about Abrego Garcia's wife. So she files for an order of protection saying he's punched her, he's beat her with a work boot, gave her a black eye. The most reasonable conclusion as to why she withdrew is because an MS-13 gang member and his gang member buddies are saying, don't mess with us. You know what MS-13 can do.
No.
You don't think so?
No. The amount of times that I've had domestics where partners, kids, we'll just stick with partners, right? Husband and wife that get into domestics with active orders of protection, that I'll go in and I'll investigate. And they say, hey, he assaulted me. I'm like, okay, cool. I need you to come in for a statement. Well, a week later, she keeps ignoring my phone calls. I got to close the case because all she wanted was to have the guy removed for the day. She's going to bring him right back into the house the next day and violate the order of protection that's in between them because they've got a long-standing relationship. And that's par for the course for a lot of domestic violence issues.
And the court filing here said they dismissed it because she did not appear in court to follow up.
And so she said that we worked it out. And I agree with you in a normal case, but not when MS-13 is involved. She's right now doing all of these things which are in a contradiction to what she had claimed before, and she's raising lots of money. So one could argue she either lied then or she's lying now, saying everything was fine, because she's getting hundreds of thousands of dollars. From what we've seen in the media of what MS-13 does to people who go against it, notably some 15 years ago, some hackers in Mexico, not really hackers, but internet activists, threatened to leak information that would compromise MS-13. They were both found strung up and hung from a highway sign. People were driving past their corpses. I would actually argue it is much simpler to assume an MS-13 gang member who's about to get an order of protection from that's going to bring unwanted attention to what they're doing likely just told her, stop or else. Maybe that's why she didn't file until 9 days later.
It could be. And listen, it's hard for me to imagine any interaction with MS-13 that wouldn't be inherently coercive, right? They're a hyper-violent gang. If they lived in your neighborhood, it would be coercive.
Indeed. So we could ask ourselves, is this a normal circumstance in which I would argue, right, exactly as you see. I mean, more than enough YouTubers have covered stories of women making false accusations for us to be like, there are instances where women claim they were abused. Who was that woman who hit herself? She got in trouble for this. She didn't.
Tawana Brawley?
Was that who that was? I don't know. Someone.
Al Sharpton.
She punched herself in the face and then claimed he did it.
No, she faked an assault.
Yeah.
That was. But
the whole
there's
race
plenty of
thing.
cases of women who will injure themselves and then report it as spousal
There was a
abuse.
super viral video this week of the landlord that went into a woman's home, called 911, and then said she was being beaten, started throwing herself on the floor and into a wall.
Wow.
And the woman had a camera in the house, and she got
Wow.
on film.
So I would just say this.
She's beating me. She's punching me.
With MS-13 involved, look, I know that MS-13's got a reputation for being super brutal.
Yeah.
I can tell you from the gangs in Chicago, we had a dude who was the dude who came on the show, Serge, who got shot at and his camera guy got shot? Brandon Buckingham. Sorry for getting your name, brother. When you give media coverage to a Chicago gang, the other gangs are like, you're dead. Because you're giving them cred, you're giving them respect, like you are propping them up, you become a target.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to bet MS-13 was like, don't mess with us.
I disagree just because the gang is so violent. An order of protection or a domestic violence issue where maybe he gets locked up or where she decides, well, hey, I'm part of the lifestyle anyway and this happens, whatever acceptance that she wants to say. An order of protection and an assault or harassment charge is nothing compared to these guys.
What if it puts the guy on the radar of the police?
I mean, they're already on the radar for the police. They're an MS-13
So this is
guy.
before. Well, actually, this was after he got arrested, actually. So, yeah, I agree with you.
You're saying this now, though, right? You're saying that she's acting this way because they're threatening her now. You're not saying it was then? Okay, because
Both.
I could see it.
Like, here's a guy who already almost got deported.
Yeah.
They're saying he was a Chicaya, which means, according to the DA, this guy appeared on Fox News, Obregon Garcia would have had to have murdered somebody. That was the next step for full initiation. He was basically like, they call him, a Chicaya means he works with the gang, he'll do what they want, but he doesn't get full benefits. He's not a full member until he kills somebody. And so he gets arrested in 2019 and he's nearly deported. But he argues, if I go back, I'll die. So he gets a temporary stay. So I looked up the law. It says a USCIS interview that finds the circumstances of his home country have changed, voids his withholding of deportation. And then he can be removed. I'd imagine any police scrutiny, especially beating your wife, is going to put his standing in this country at risk and negatively impact a gang.
His deportation was not paused. He had a final order of deportation.
Right.
The order of withholding just says you have to go. You can't stay in the U.S. anymore. You're not lawfully present, but we will not order you deported to El Salvador. That's all it meant.
Unless the law states that unless the circumstances of your home country have changed, thus that there's no longer a threat.
That's true. That takes a hearing.
Exactly.
Right. But he lost his withholding on a different basis entirely. In February this year, when MS-13 was designated a terrorist organization, he became a terrorist, and they're ineligible by function of law.
So
to
that's
have
I agree.
grandfathered
Now
in.
let's go back to 2021. when she claims he was beating her and then stopped abruptly. Perhaps you're right, and I'm crazy, right? Or I'm exaggerating, or I'm viewing it wrongly. She just was falsely accusing the guy because there was something she was trying to get out of it.
No, or then this is what I'm trying to say. She's not faking it. She was beat, but this is just a part of the domestic violence circle that happens in relationships.
That she
she gets beat, she gets over it. They stay together. He brings in food. She loves him. They love each other. She gets beat. He brings in food. She gets fatter.
Battered wife
and then,
syndrome.
Yeah. What's that?
It's battered wife syndrome.
Yeah, battered
Where
wife. So
yeah.
where else is she going to go? And what I'm trying to understand is your point of like the money coming in.
That's now.
That's now.
$200,000?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. First of all, she's got an incentive to say whatever she's got to say about a guy she claimed was beating her. But the gang is also going to be like, we want that money.
You think the gang is taking the money that she's bringing in?
Hey, look, man, I don't know if I have a more serious view of gangs than you or the people who watch, but I guess from the gangs that I know and how they operate,
Yeah,
like,
I'm
a
with,
regular street gang in Chicago would be doing exactly as I'm describing it right now.
I'm
I know
with,
Zoom
I'm with
nothing
Tim on
about
this.
Let me
She had found $200,000 in a grocery bag on the street and brought it home, and the gang found out about it. They would take the money. They're not going to let her keep that money.
The reason I think this is the gangs that I knew in Chicago, if a woman was panicking over her boyfriend who was in the gang was beating her, the gang would walk up to her with a gun and say, you say one word of this and you're dead.
Yeah.
Why would MS-13 not do that to her when she filed for a domestic?
I'm not saying that they have to. I feel like you're coming from the point of view where because she dropped these charges and because she's gang affiliated, that it has to be
No, it has to.
some
I'm
sort
saying
of gang.
Yeah.
the view I have is what is the simpler solution? What makes the least amount of assumptions? In a normal circumstance, I completely agree. The cycle of domestic violence.
But
women
why
get mad.
wouldn't
Can we just go with something that's a lot simpler though, and just say that they're asking her about things that like might make it so there's less sympathy and the money is coming. Like we could just say the money's coming in. Like
No, right. I
need
agree.
a negative connotation.
But 2021 is before money, before this case, before the terrorism designation. Why did she drop the domestic charge?
That's so normal though.
It's
Every
so par for
many
the
women
course.
just drop it either because they can't provide for their kids and they know they need that like the man back whether it's miserable or not. So like as somebody who
For
grew up in
sure.
a foster household, domestic violence is something that is common in
Okay,
many
so then-
of my
so
foster
then
siblings.
we'll argue
this
this.
is a thing.
So my view and what I'm describing is I think it's slightly more probable that the gang did what gangs do and says, shut your mouth or else. Do you think that's a possibility? Just not less likely? It's just
I
substantially
think
less
it's
likely?
extremely less likely.
I'm going to say that I think it's even more likely that the handlers that are arguing for a specific culture point right now would be saying, shut your mouth.
Yes.
I'm just going to say it. Like, if I'm going to say, I think the political handlers would be more likely.
I think she's extremely
moment.
safe because the people that want to push a political
They're
agenda
this
are
political
using
agenda
her
is
as a
selling
puppet, as a
right now for them.
mouthpiece, not so much
Yes.
MS-13. I think
don't
she's
know.
the safest she could possibly be because she's surrounded by people that want to see
That's a
her
good,
and her
that's a good-
family
It's
succeed.
a good point.
For
It's a
me,
good point.
that's for me. I think it's political operatives that are telling.
The lawyers on record for Abrego Garcia are like from a top 10 law firm.
Yeah.
Right? These guys make $1 million a
Yeah.
year.
That was true with
This is
Mahmoud
pro
Khalil
bono
at
work.
Columbia
Yeah.
as well. It's
Yeah.
like he has like
Goodness of their
20
hearts.
So
amazing
MS-13
lawyers.
sitting back, be like,
all
"We're
these
rich."
top 20 law firms, they're billion-dollar operations. They all have huge pro bono units just to do progressive legal work.
Well, and
do
that's
you
why
guys
Trump
think
brought in,
then? Do you guys think that MS-13's backing away from her? Like,
Yes.
Yeah,
she's gonna
They
set
don't
him
want
up.
any. They don't want to be close to this, and I don't think they want more attention like this.
She's on the news getting sympathy from half the country right now. Why
Yeah.
would they go mess with her? That's going to put
Yeah.
a spotlight on them.
Yeah, I don't think. Like for me,
don't
I
ever
think the
accuse- How
much
political
is-
manipulation is more likely.
How much is $200,000 worth from a gang that's doing human
Perhaps,
trafficking?
but we also like we've seen people kill for less.
Sure.
Yeah, but the government is gangsters too.
Yeah,
I mean, the progressives are gangsters too,
you get
right?
that from a rap
We
song?
just saw a video of
Fantastic.
a guy threatening to kill everybody, right? Did we play
oh
it during
yeah.
the show? or-
So some Carmelo Anthony fan. Is that what it was?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I feel bad for the NBA star Carmelo Anthony.
Oh gosh, yeah, it's a rough.
like-
Yeah, that's what I kept thinking.
This guy's a
It's
legend.
a rough decision report
He's
for
with a
him this
C.
week.
The other guy's with a K.
It is. And I remember when someone said, like, hey, did you hear about the story about that dude, Carmelo Anthony, who killed that kid? And I was like, what? NBA superstar Carmelo Anthony did what? And then I looked it up and I was like, that's weird. I was like, well, it has kind of sucked because I wonder when you say the name, who first comes to mind is like taking his legacy from him. But yeah, I don't know. I think you guys make good points. I just think when I see this, you know, the experiences that I've had in Chicago with women who are dating gang members is that if a woman ever got beat by her boyfriend in a gang, she'd never even get to the filing process. the gang would be there knocking on her door and they'd have guns and they'd be like, look, just don't say anything. Otherwise, it's going to get bad for everybody, if you know what I mean.
I'm sure that's true, but that lacks the political dynamic that we have going on here.
Yeah,
And the
like
spotlight.
I'm saying in 2021 before the spotlight. Not now.
Oh, I see,
agree
I
with what you're
see.
saying
Right,
now.
right,
like,
right.
So what is your issue with 2021? Because I still think
in
I'm not
2021,
grasping what you're saying.
So in 2019, he's arrested.
Yeah.
He is found by a court to be deportable, to be deported, and a member of MS-13.
Yeah.
The gang's probably not happy about that. However, they give him withholding of deportation because he claims he will die if he goes home. So he gets a temporary holding on the deportation. In 2021, she says to the government, he's beating me.
Yes.
This is going to get him deported. It's going to get him in trouble, and potentially the other guys who are with him, who knows? It's going to put a negative light on him.
Yeah.
The gang experience that I have is any scrutiny from law enforcement on what they do could blow the whole thing open. And the last thing they want when they're dealing drugs is a woman claiming she's being beaten, which generates substantially more sympathy than someone slinging pot to another drug dealer or to some scummy kid.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is she drops this in 2021 because MS-13 says, we've already got these people breathing down our neck, trying to deport Abrego. He works for us, and you're going to screw us over. Let's say Abrego was accused of human trafficking. He was in a car loaded with people in 2022. This means if that accusation is true, he was still working and doing trafficking work for MS-13 a year later. If she goes to the police and says he's beating me, they lose their human trafficker. So I think it stands to reason. They went to her and said, shut the up. And she said, okay.
It's
Could
plausible.
be.
It's plausible.
Because then he continued to work for them.
Yeah.
But again, keep in mind, I just want to clarify because we keep saying that this guy's deportation was paused. It was not paused.
No, the order is called the withholding of deportation.
All the withholding means is that we will not deport him to El Salvador.
Just to that one country.
He was still required to leave the United States.
Yes.
So the order saying you cannot stay here, that was not paused. He was not legally present.
Exactly. And I suppose the issue is we can't deport someone to a different country without treaties and foreign policy arrangements like we have with El Salvador now.
Normally, we let people self-deport. So normally, we don't just lock them in handcuffs and throw them out of the country. We let them gather their affairs.
Yeah.
You know, they have homes, they have furniture, they have kids, and we let them get their affairs together. They know they're legally required to leave, and they know it's going to go much harder for them if they get caught again. But this guy did it for 6 years after his final order of deportation. He was still here.
Yeah. The point I was making the other day, which the left is lying about, is judges cannot create de facto permanent residency through a technicality. That means this is a temporary status, which is subject to being revoked at any time. And the only mistake Trump made, if there was an error, was that he needed to have a USCIS interview with Abrego Garcia before deportation, which literally could have been, so your fear as stated in court was MS-13 will kill you in El Salvador? Yes. Good news. Nayib Bukele has jailed all MS-13 and they're no longer a strong presence. The crime rate has dropped substantially. Withholding of deportation void on the plane.
So there's a concept in law called harmless error. So it's very common for someone to get convicted in a criminal trial. They appeal their conviction. They say, the judge in my trial did something wrong. And the appellate court looks at it and says, you know what? You're right. That was a mistake. The trial judge made a mistake. But you would have been convicted anyway. The error is harmless. Nothing changes. You don't get a new trial. You get no benefit from the appeal. This is harmless error. If we brought back Abrego Garcia today to the U.S., what would immediately happen to him?
Deported.
He'd
He'd
be
be deported to
deported.
El Salvador. So
that's what
even if
McKellen
there
was
was
saying.
an error, even if we denied him a hearing we were supposed to give him, it's harmless error because the outcome's exactly the same.
I do absolutely love that. That like they're demanding he be returned. And he would literally walk in, go before a judge, have his withholding removed, and sent right back.
Exactly.
It makes no sense. It's the stupidest thing in the world. Look,
Can we just have that happen so they shut up?
Seems like a lot of facilitation.
Yeah, Trump doesn't want to do that because then Trump's bending the knee to these federal courts that do not have, in fact, the authority to
And they
make
don't
him
have
do
In
that.
addition, they
Jurisdiction,
could then
that's
say
what
you could do it for like more
Well,
down the road.
you
If it's
guys-
setting a precedent. I assume that that's part of the reason because you're right, bringing him back and dealing with it that way would probably
when
be
the-
more
if you
effective.
want to
in
be
this
Come
moment.
back as a guest of the President of the United States.
So
if you want to be
Come on back
Machiavellian,
in.
my advice to the Trump administration, if you want to be evil, right? There's always a couple, I always, whenever I tell people, when they say something like, what should we do about this circumstance? I always ask them, how evil do you want to be? Because if you want to be evil, there's really easy solutions to a lot of things, but being evil sucks, so don't do it. All that needs to happen is Nayib Bukele tell Abrego Garcia, we're going to take care of your family. we're going to pay you cash, and you are going to admit to being a member of MS-13, apologize, and refuse to return to the United States. Imagine what would happen if he did that.
And that would be fine with me because it's not something Trump is doing. I can explain why.
But just imagine, like, if the Democrats came out and right now, Rebecca Garcia is on TV saying, I am an MS-13 gay member.
They would do what they're already transitioning to now, which is saying, well, it's not really about him, everybody. The wife beater's not important anymore. It's about the principle.
You flip it over and say that he gave a gang member money.
But the reason Trump must not...
I'm saying if you're evil, you don't admit to doing that.
All you have to say is, well, where did that $50,000 in your bank account come from, Pedro?
No, but like if the government of El Salvador wanted to be evil, there's not going to be a trace that can be detected.
Oh, that's
in
true.
A meaningful way.
Yeah.
And the guy, I mean, okay, they can be really evil. They can push a gun into his back and say you're sorry, you're a gang member. You know what I mean? And then he does. And then what do? What do Democrats say if? Let's just say this. If Rebecca Garcia went on TV, when I saw that picture of him meeting with Van Hollen, I was like, what if he just tells the guy right now, no, I actually am in the gang. I don't want to come. I don't want to go back to the States. What does Van Hollen do?
They didn't let him talk to Van Hollen.
What was it?
I thought they didn't let him talk to
Oh,
Van
yeah, they
Hollen.
did.
They did.
There's photos.
They had
Yeah, they
brunch.
did.
They had margaritas together.
Mimosas. We're chilling.
Yeah, there's photos of them enjoying a margarita together.
Nayib
and now
Bukele posted it.
the Democrats are arguing that they gave the margaritas as a prop. Like, they're arguing that they didn't want the margaritas, but El Salvador put it there intentionally
That
to
was
make
the New
it
York
look
Times reporter.
More
said.
friendly.
Yeah, was it?
It was like a New York Times reporter said, I saw them bring the margaritas and they didn't even want them.
They should have put a box of condoms on the table.
Whatever it is, my comment
I-
section is saying they didn't have real margaritas.
I do love the meme that's find someone who looks at you the way a Democrat looks at an MS-13 gang member.
Oh my gosh.
Man.
I have like a really like a very unique perspective. Everybody has unique perspectives on everything, and like I'm deeply purple. Everybody pretty much knows that at this point. When it comes to legal versus illegal immigration, my first husband, his family they live near Fort Huachuca in Benson, Arizona, and every one of them served in the military to earn their citizenship. All of the males in the family line, going back 4 generations, have served in the military, different branches, mostly the Navy. And almost all of the men and several of the women in the family now choose to work for Border Patrol. And I was kind of surprised by that when I had my daughter and I was spending time with them down near Fort Huachuca. I'm like, why? You guys, why do you do this? And they basically said,
Because they need
Come
somebody
up-
on the inside.
They said you don't understand the things that the coyotes do to the children. They're smuggling in. Find your first pregnant woman's body in the desert with something literally eating her insides, and you'll understand that the legal, you need to come in this way. They really deeply like taught me their perspectives, and I realized it wasn't that's where a huge amount of my influence on legal versus illegal immigration, especially across our southern border, has come from, because I was very liberal back then. And they were like, you don't understand what they're doing to these children. And me having grown up in a foster household, I was surrounded by children that were mercilessly abused by people. And to hear that was happening through trafficking and through the coyotes and what was happening to these kids along the way really kind of traumatized me.
And that's why Tom Homan is so energized about this. He's energized about this not out of hate for immigrants, but out of love for the children and the women who are being just horrifically destroyed in this process.
Let's jump to this story from the Dallas Morning News. This is not a good one, man. The Austin Metcalf's family was swatted today, according to Frisco police. Officers responded to a false gunshot call to an address tied to the family.
This is horrific.
Say Frisco police said officers responded early in the evening to a gunshot call to an address tied to Austin Metcalf's family. Grant Cottingham, a police spokesperson, said the call turned out to be false. DHS defines swatting as an act of making malicious hoax calls. Everybody knows what that is. Earlier Thursday, the parents of Carmelo Anthony, a 17-year-old teenager who is facing a murder charge in connection with the stabbing, had spoken publicly about the case for the first time. Jeff Metcalf, Austin's father, was barred from attending the news conference. Yo, this is getting absolutely insane. We did talk about this to a great degree earlier today on the Culture War podcast, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, swatting is attempted murder.
Swatting is so dangerous, and it's happening politically more and more and more, and we really need to more strenuously criminalize it, in my opinion. It is so dangerous. If somebody came into my house, we would use weapons. If I didn't, we would use weapons, and that would put my children at risk, my life at risk. I know a bunch of content creators that are left or right and are political content creators that have been swatted recently, but this that's horrific, in my opinion. That's beyond horrific.
Things are getting absolutely crazy in this country. we've been talking a bit about like the Mangione effect and the escalation of political violence while largely liberals cheer it on. But this is crazy. Clearly, whoever did this is, I would imagine, is going to be on the left. In alignment with all the other swattings we've seen of conservative personalities, the challenging thing with all of the political violence we're seeing is it's hard to know whether or not you can discern between politically motivated violence anymore and random acts because of the celebration of Luigi Mangione.
Wait, are you trying to say that because of like Luigi Mangione that this swatting event like took place because it's been like normalized?
So you've got, simply put, yes, but with caveats.
Okay.
When they go on TV, on Colbert and Kimmel and cheer for the Tesla attacks and the audience claps and cheers.
Yeah.
When they go on the Daily Show and he says they're firebombing these things and people clap and cheer. And then Jordan Klepper's like, wow. When entire online forums are dedicated to Luigi Mangione because they view him as Taylor Lorenz said, a morally good man who's handsome. We saw a copycat of Luigi Mangione showed up at United Healthcare HQ in Minnetonka and threatened to start shooting people, even though he had no grievance whatsoever with United Health. They just said, I guess he was crazy. That is clearly Mangione effect. The left, widespread on the internet, is celebrating the violence, and you will get crazy people doing crazy things. What you are seeding in people's minds is attempted murder and violence is justifiable if I feel it so. So what my point is, swattings happen. But we've had 20 swattings targeting conservative individuals in the past month and a half.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a massive uptick.
Yeah.
And this is related to, I would argue, the Mangione effect, Teslas, and things like this. So when I see this, my point is, there's no discernible way to know if this would have been a one-off swatting incident because of the hotness button of the issue, or if the increase in support for political violence is leading to calls like this.
I'm just going to step way back and I'm going to go way high up. Historically, every civilization in human history, when they reach a certain point of income and wealth inequality, begins to have a populace that will resort to levels of violence when they feel unheard by their legislatures, their Congress, their elected officials. That has historically happened in every single civilization in history when you reach a point where there is a lack of hope among the population and a belief that they have no way to actually make a difference and actually restore hope for their next generations. I am not agreeing with it. But that is the Luigi Mangione effect is not because he was handsome, and it's not because it was just United Healthcare. It is because people they think there's different systems of justice for the rich and the not rich. They think there's different systems of capability. That we talked about last time I was on here, the stock market. 88% of equities in this country in our stock market are held by the top 10% of owners.
93.
Okay, 93.
It's
Worse. 93% of all the equities in the stock market are held by the top 10% of earners. Okay, that means the remaining 7% are held by the next 40% of earners. Okay, and what's happening is because all of that is now compounding, it is creating bigger and bigger black holes of wealth extraction. And so the Mangione effect, I don't think, is related to this. I think political violence in general is an inevitability, because we have a deeply corrupted political system.
But the Mangione effect is a subset in this criteria you're describing.
I think they're very, very scared. I think that the reason they're pushing on it so hard is because they're scared he's going to be the new Columbine, and that will become the thing they do instead.
And that's what we're seeing, and that's the Mangione effect. And that's the concern, that a swatting call like this would not have happened had the left not, over the past 5 months, been publicly and on social media advocating for murder, death, and violence.
I don't see the connection with swatting and that.
We had 20 swattings of conservatives already, completely related to Elon Musk and Tesla.
We had
20 swattings directly targeting conservatives.
We shouldn't have it.
And now the cause celebre of conservatives the family just got swatted.
Those are politically motivated. This, I don't see any political motivation other than I know that there's like left and right that are saying, black kid bad, white kid bad. They deserve to die.
Is there no political motivation here?
I'm saying racial motivation.
The story
racial motivation. I think it's more racial motivation.
That is the politics of what's going on. The only reason this story, stories like this happen all day, every day. Okay, we went on the show and I pulled up like 7 stories of other crazy violent incidents that happened in various places. The right has chosen this to target and demand justice for. I'm not saying they're wrong, and I'm not saying they should or should not be doing anything else. This is the story. This is how it goes. The left has responded by donating $500,000 to Carmelo Anthony. In the past month and a half, we've had 20 swattings of conservatives. This family has been tweeted out support from every single one of those people. Of course, there's a political angle. Let me put it this way.
I think you're right. There is. I think so too. I'll take it back. There is a sort of political attention that this is getting.
Nobody would swat this family if it wasn't in the news.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that it's the
only in the news for
Mangione
political
effect
reasons.
or Luigi effect.
It's only in the news for political reasons.
Correct.
Right. So if you swat 20 conservatives and you know who those conservatives are, and that's why you swatted them, and they all tweet out in support of this family, and then the family gets swatted too, I think there is a possibility, a strong one, that this is a component of the left being emboldened in calls for violence and trying to escalate violence against their political enemies. The point I was making, it's not that it's a guarantee that's the case.
I understand.
It's how can we discern between what would normally be a random act of violence or something that is more entrenched in a faction of people in this country feel emboldened to commit acts of violence.
I'll agree with that. I can't. I feel like it's easier to separate this from Mangione and say that it's racially motivated because they don't like what's going on. I will say that there's probably a political side to it where the conservatives are supporting the white kid.
Yes.
Liberals are supporting.
But we're not disagreeing with each other.
Okay.
What I'm saying is there are people whose political worldview is largely racial. The Mangione effect does not mean that you want to kill CEOs. It means that the left has celebrated violence and murder. And that means all subsets of that political class now feel violence and death are acceptable. The swatting is because they are racially motivated politically, but it's emboldened and only happened because of the Mangione effect. That is, the left has told people, you will be a hero and you'll be celebrated for doing this.
I'm going to say in this instance, though, we're seeing a very deep left-right divide on this, and that's very clear. But the Mangione effect has united people on both sides like nothing since the Titan submersible and our recent trip to space. Let me tell you,
People
the Mangione effect online is not left-right. It is pretty even. It is young versus old is what it is. It is people that have hope versus people that have none.
But there is a very clear distinction between the right maybe saying, well, we all know healthcare systems are messed up, but overwhelmingly, the right's view on this is randomly killing a guy fixed nothing, made everything worse, and is wrong. And the left is doing shows where they cheer for him and they've donated $1 million to him. It is clearly distinct. I'm
going to say that I am seeing generational differences far more than I am seeing left-right differences on the Mangione effect.
Go to every single conservative podcaster and they've condemned Mangione, and go to every single liberal and they're celebrating.
They have to, but we all have to condemn what he did.
What's your breakdown? The young people are in favor of him, and
my point is that I'm not even going to say they're in favor of it. They're literally
you're saying
it's the equivalent of saying thoughts and prayers. That's what I'm saying. And I'm not seeing it left, right, online, which I'm on there an awful lot.
You're saying that the young people are, for lack of a better word, pro Luigi.
The young people, I'm going to go all the way up to like 40 and under. I'm going to say are pro, not necessarily what he did.
No, sure, I understand. But
are pro the fact that nothing else is making a difference in their future. And all the wealth is with this small group of people, and they are getting that wealth through the exploitation of other people.
Well, somebody's supporting Luigi because Jacob from Give Send Go was here today, and he's raised $1 million.
Absolutely.
So we got a poll in the chat. And right now, with 335 votes, 90% say no, I do not support Luigi Mangione.
You have to say.
Yeah, but you're a right-wing podcaster, far right. So obviously,
which is my point.
Side with you.
No, if the right was evenly split, the right would be saying what their audience wanted them to say.
I'm not
and their
saying
audience
they're evenly split.
Would be giving them thumbs down. Well, you just did.
I'm saying that we are generationally split, and I am seeing pretty healthy from both sides of the aisle that are not in favor of what he did, but they are in favor of someone doing anything that makes a difference and makes people pause.
Didn't make a difference.
It made everything worse.
Did it make? I mean, I'm not saying it made a difference in the lives of the children. But what I am saying is that I am not saying it made a difference. What I am saying is that inevitably, if people don't start expanding the conversation about the wealth inequality in our country and where the wealth is being held and how it is no longer being reinvested into the cities, the communities, if we don't do something about how much the working class of America, small businesses of America, the blue collar class of America is exploited to make billionaires, which we spent the whole first half of the show talking about, we are going to see more and more violence, and they're going to care less and less.
And I would push back on the notion that this hasn't made any difference. To you, it hasn't made any difference. To a conservative, it doesn't make any difference because nothing substantive has changed. But a lot of people, the difference is emotional for them. And now people are talking about this and paying attention to this, and they feel like they're being heard. And for them, that's the difference.
I would argue the left feels like he made a difference because he opened the door for them to accept political violence, which they largely now do. So there was that poll that came out recently that found they polled, I think, 2,000 people, and they found 55% of people who lean left support political violence. There was another poll from a year ago that found something like a majority of people left aligned, be it liberal to left, were supportive of the assassination of political leaders, including Donald Trump. So what Mangione didn't change the healthcare system. It entrenched it. It made the higher ups who run these companies hide their positions and hide their names and cover this up. It did not affect premiums. It did not affect policy. But to the left, what was done? It was more symbolic of we will eat the rich. It opened the door for Jimmy Kimmel and Colbert to celebrate and advocate for political violence, and the audience cheered for it. It created a moment where they can culturally and publicly state their intention to murder. And the right doesn't do that. The financial circumstances of our country are opening the doors to political violence by not serving their voters anymore. And I am not saying I agree with it. I don't. But the more that our politicians are serving CEOs and billionaires, the more we're parading billionaires and taking their money and serving their interests instead of our voters, the more that has happened, the more that voters have to increasingly find ways to make themselves heard. And again, every civilization in human history where we reached this level of wealth inequality, political violence followed. Until there was a revolution and we went full guillotine down Wall Street. And that's what's going to happen if our politicians don't start listening to their What do you mean
voters.
guillotines down Wall Street?
I am saying that Marie Antoinette may have gotten the guillotine in the French Revolution, but the next revolution that happens in our country, if we don't start listening to voters, is going to be on Wall Street. It's going to be for the billionaires.
And I would push back on the right not engaging in political violence. It's not violence of a physical sort, like killing people, but I guarantee you the left feels right now that Trump is inflicting political violence on them.
But he's not.
On their NGO. No.
It's a question of is he or isn't he?
I don't mean
It's
physically.
a perception.
I don't mean physically. He's destroying their NGO money laundering operations. He's attacking the independent agencies.
Right. I get what you're saying. And I agree. Trump is crushing our enemies, and we are very happy to see him do it. But my point is, when we're dealing with political structures, the way you do it is what Trump is doing. He's doing everything right.
Sure.
The left.
I'm just talking about their perception
is threatening
of it.
to murder people because of it. Let me pull up this story. This is going viral. It's a massive story. This seemingly unknown guy named Nicholas Decker posted this article, which now has 9.2 million views with 14,000 responses and 5,300 retweets, saying, quote, "When must we kill them?" Where he wrote an essay that says, because of what Donald Trump is doing, the question must be asked among those who oppose Trump, when will they decide to physically murder him and everyone else? Well, the first thing I would say is, when must we kill them? The answer is never. That is not the way we handle politics in this country, no matter what you think is going on. There is nothing in this country right now that rises to the level of needing political violence. And I said this during Biden's administration as well. When people were on the right were saying, how do we know when it's gone too far? They're arresting Trump's lawyer. I say, we're going to have an election and we're going to win, and Trump's going to win the popular vote. And that will show that the people are awake and we're going to do this right. And we did. The Democrats have now realized they're on the wrong side of history. For people like Bill Maher, what has he done? He had a meeting with Trump. He came out and said, you know what? Trump was a nice guy. Wow, I can't believe it. He started moderating his pitch. Charlemagne the God, what did he do? Oh, you know what? Maybe Trump isn't a fascist. For these middle-of-the-road default libs, as soon as Trump won the popular vote, they said, uh-oh, I'm on the wrong side of history. But for the hardcore progressives, for the far left, there's no coming back from where they went. So they have no choice but to carry on, and that's why they write things like this. So again, this argument that he's making is quite literally the Mangione effect, now being written and shared far and wide by the left, advocating for, quote, evil has come to America, the president's administration is engaged in barbarism, and it goes on to make largely what you describe as Trump's attack on the institutions. The funny thing is, if you read this paragraph largely from as if this guy was a conservative, it aligns pretty similarly.
The first paragraph does.
Yeah.
Exactly. Imprisoning your political opponents like the Democrats did to Trump and his lawyers and the people who tried to help Donald Trump and his advisors. The thing is, the Trump supporters never did decide to go out and murder or kill anybody. Nobody even died on January 6th. As bad as January 6th was, a riot happened at the Capitol that should not have happened. But that was after
somebody died.
Yeah.
no Trump supporter killed anybody on January 6th.
Correct.
To clarify.
Yep.
So the right did not, even when they committed the worst violence from the right we've seen, and I'm going to clarify, the right is a fake term. Let's say Trump supporters, the Trump base. When this story came up, I did some digging. I asked ChatGPT, who commits more political violence, left or right? What did it say?
No answer.
The right.
Oh.
Substantially. And so I said, okay, define the right. And what did it say? Anti-government. It said
isn't that the
anarchist.
left right now?
Indeed. And it said anarchist. And it said neo-Nazi. And it said white nationalist. And I said, some of those factions disagree with each other. How are they the right? The definition given by academics to define the right as violence, they took a bunch of random groups and called it the right. Neo-Nazis and libertarians are at the opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
They despise each other. But these academics call them both the right. Sovereign citizens who believe that they are free from government control are at the opposite end of the spectrum from neo-Nazis who believe the government should have full authority and control over people on a racial identitarian basis. Yet the academics will combine them. Mm-hmm. So I asked it, let's clarify. Pro-Trump, the conservative mainstream faction of right-wingers that we describe it, no violence. None.
I have literally gone all the way to the mat since I covered the assassination attempt in Butler on my live stream the day that it happened. And I have gone all the way to the mat and said that for anyone that feels like somebody missed or that the world could have been better had someone not missed, which I find to be vulgar and disgusting. Nobody that feels that way has any idea how horrific it would have been for the fabric of our country. That nobody understands what would have happened to our country in the weeks, months, and years that followed that had anyone succeeded in assassinating one of our political candidates. Mm-hmm. And that political violence is never, ever, ever the answer.
Well, we even had David Brooks in the New York Times today calling for an uprising against Trump and Trumpism. He said, what is happening now is not normal politics. We're seeing an assault on the fundamental institutions of our civic life, things we should all swear loyalty to, Democrat, Independent, or Republican. And he's talking about Harvard, and he's talking about the NIH and USAID, all of these things that have completely lost.
Didn't Barbara Baxter just call for taking to the streets too?
Well, they all do it. Maxine
Someone
Waters
went out and gave a
done it
speech and
repeatedly.
said, take to the streets, rise up.
Yeah, here it is.
I thought that was Maxine Waters a while
It was
ago.
Maxine. I'm sorry. Thank you. Maxine Waters.
I stole it from you. That's okay.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's
She gave the answer first.
She said it before. So did Kamala Harris. It won't stop, and it's not going to stop.
Which actually makes me want to push back on your Mangione effect, because I feel like I've seen the same type of violent rhetoric of you need to rise up, you need to do these things before Trump was assassinated, because we were all saying that what led to Trump, well, not assassinated, but before Trump was shot, because once he was, we were saying, look at all the things that the people on the left, especially the Democratic nominee for president, has said, which has led to this political violence. So I don't think it's the Mangione effect. I think that that's a part of it, but I think it's this left-wing desire to scare people into thinking that it's the end of the Constitution and rise up. And that came from the political, the 2024 political campaign.
Just to clarify, the Mangione effect is just to describe an uptick in public support for violence following the assassination.
It's a step function up.
So
Right?
like
It's-
There's been
you had
polling
a-
So it's a subset of all of what you're describing. It is not right. So it just basically, after the CEO was killed, we saw public conversations that were supportive of violence.
I mean, we saw those after the assassination attempt as well.
On Trump?
On Trump.
yes.
Right. They're calling it the Mangione effect because he's become a saint figure to the left. They use his photo and they make it literally. They
the
make memes of them
candles.
as
I'm
saints.
going to
Yes.
keep saying it's not the left. It's the younger generations. I mean, it might be more left, maybe.
88.
But by and
does that
large, younger
differentiate
generations
itself?
are more left historically, because when what do they say? Under 30 and you've got a heart, you've got to be a liberal. Over 30 and you've got a brain, you got to be a conservative.
I don't think
it's like an
that's-
old shtick.
but
I
that's
don't think
that's not
currently
true.
true.
No,
that's
I agree.
never-
I
it's
agree.
never-
He made
that's
huge
never been
gains
true.
with Gen Z, and that's because Gen Z decided that the left was not serving them. They're educated, they're smart, they're intelligent. If he doesn't if he doesn't serve them, they're going to turn on him too.
Gen
right? Like,
Z is seeing a resurgence in quote, like literal quote, faith in Jesus. So
yes, no, I agree.
I actually recorded a segment on this earlier. Trevor Noah came out and said he believes that everything will get worse if the church goes away, and that people need church. And I was surprised to hear him say it.
We need
It's
a moral.
definitely
We need a
true.
moral compass.
Among-
we need morality, and a church is a pretty good vector for instilling morality in a population.
Among Gen Z, they have the highest surge in faith in Jesus Christ.
Yeah, they are. That's absolutely true.
So like boomers are the lowest actually, which is interesting. 66% of boomer females and 62% of boomer males.
Everybody looked at me
They say, "Are you a boomer? How old are you?"
by like 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
Congratulations.
What a boomer thing to say.
Happy birthday.
And then actually, I think I can just pull this up and
I mean,
can
that's
find it.
definitely true. Just judging from my family and my parents' generation. My father eventually became born again, but my parents' generation, they gave up religion entirely to the point where my great grandmother, my Nona, she gave me her rosary beads that were really precious to her that had been blessed by Pope John Paul II, and she gave them to me. She was like, "You're Catholic. You're the only one." And I was
so
like, "No,
I was
no,
wrong.
Nona."
Millennials are the biggest uptick. So take a look at this. So this is tracking Gen Z over the past 6 years, and 54% of women, 52% of men in 2019. As of today, it's 67% of men and 61% of women. Major boost. Among millennials, 58% of women and 52% of men in 2019. Now it's 71% of men and 64% of women. The one thing that's really interesting is in the younger generation, men are overwhelmingly moving towards Jesus Christ. The question was, the percentage of U.S. adults by generation who say, quote, "I have made a personal commitment to follow Jesus that is still important in my life today."
They need inspiration and guidance, and they're not getting it from their parents, and they're not getting it from college.
And they're not getting it from the elites in Washington. They're not getting it from our elected officials. They're not getting it from anywhere else. So that makes perfect sense to me that they would turn towards the church.
I think there's two factors here. One is that conservatives had way more kids in the 2000s. So I talk about that ad nauseum, in fact, that it was like 1.8 for, it was 2.01 in the 2000s for conservatives and like 1.7 for liberals, or 1.43. And that meant that for every, 8 that were being born or whatever.
There were 3 that were aborted.
Well,
That makes it for the point or half a kid.
that's probably true, actually. The reason the liberals were lower is because they were engaging in abortions. But this means that of the kids born, there's going to be 4 that are conservative and 3 that are liberal. So what do you do in 20 years? You are going to see a huge boost, 12% or so. And that's exactly what we've seen.
I can tell you what you do.
11.6%.
You import tens of millions of third worlders who are dependent upon the Democrats for their lives.
Indeed.
They're all so deeply,
But-
generally Catholic.
But what I'm describing,
They're also impoverished and they're dependent upon the
Most
government gives them
Latin American
housing,
countries are
medical
like-
care, food.
but I need to clarify, what I'm describing doesn't account for the fact that the same Gen Z cohort from 2019 has become more Christian. That implies an ideological shift over time. And Gen Z's eldest are 27 years old.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at this, we're talking about 21-year-olds who 6 years ago were atheist, and now a 15% increase among men that have come to the church, come to Christianity.
Well, what's happened in the last 6 years? A lot of bad stuff.
A lot of bad
Indeed.
stuff. And when you look at millennials, their entire life has been a slew of bad stuff. Over and over and over again, they've survived so many, once in 100 year, once in a century, catastrophic things that just keep happening one after another.
Actually, what I find fascinating about that idea that millennials have is what's actually once in a century or longer is the golden age in the 90s. After the fall of the Soviet Union, we had, that was it. America was the unipolar dominant power. The Cold War was over. And so Americans lived pretty dang well.
Yeah, we sure did all the way up
That-
to the dot-com bubble.
I was just going to say.
Indeed. So there was this period of not even 10 years or so where millennials were growing up. So when the disasters start happening, they go, these are all once in a lifetime disasters. And it's like, actually, my grandfather lived through the Great Depression, 2 world wars, the assassination of Kennedy. Like, it was disaster. Yeah, it was his whole life was a series of
Cold War.
political disasters.
I would suggest this was deliberate. I mean, I came of age in the 80s. I went through high school and college in the 80s. 1980s America was a fundamentally different place than the United States today.
It was pretty good, right?
It was amazing.
There was
It
still
was
so
80?
much possibility, though. There was, we had
80 to
busted up
84.
a bunch of the monopolies.
That was the
We
time.
Yeah, I
had good
graduated high school in
antitrust
83.
enforcement.
So you were jamming with your buddies to Men at Work.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That was it. We'll never recover. That was the
AC/DC
greatest.
in my case, but
No, Men at Work, the greatest band of all time.
okay.
I mean,
We'll have to fight it out.
agree to disagree there.
The 90s were like the reward for what America had come through.
It's like a reward.
It was like a
It did
reward
feel a
for
little
what
bit
we'd
like
come
that.
through. We had peace. There was money. I remember like I was, doing art and stuff, and there was just money everywhere. It's like our friends would go out, we'd have no money. Someone would buy us a bunch of oysters and champagne. Like, I don't know who paid.
Well, you were a young woman at the time.
I know, but I was out with like guys, girls, like it was, because you didn't date in the 90s. You just went out with a group of your 10 friends.
Is that what that show was about?
I don't know.
Real world?
No, Friends.
In the 90s, I graduated high school in 98.
Yeah, I graduated before that, but like, yeah.
Wow, how old are you?
37. I graduated in 05.
You and me. I'm 39. These people.
I'm the youngest kid at the table.
I'm
Well,
33.
No,
Serge is the youngest, but he's not talking.
yeah.
He won't admit to anything.
that's fair.
Stone.
Well, there is a
God.
detective present.
Yeah, right. I forgot. Like, no one's supposed to talk to this guy. What are we doing? He's gonna leave, and he's got a recorder, and he's got a notepad. He's gonna write down everything that was
Everything.
And he's gonna be like, if you ever come to Buffalo.
I took notes.
Took notes. All right, my friends, we're going to go to your chats. But before we do, we got an awesome sponsor. I'm actually a huge fan of Brickhouse Nutrition. So you guys can go to fieldofgreens.com and use code Tim. I have it right here. Check this out. This stuff is awesome. It's organic superfood. This one's wild berry flavor, and it's green. It's like a bunch of vegetables. And you put it in your drink, and it makes it taste like berries, but it's got like kale and spinach and stuff in it. Anyway, I should probably read what they want me to say about this, because I could just go off on how much I love this stuff. But so let's get real. We're all human. I like to talk a big game about how I eat healthy, but the truth is I don't. Today I stripped the cheese off of pizza and threw the bread back in the box and then just ate the cheese.
Dude, I saw that. That was you. I saw 3 pieces of pizza with no cheese, and I was like, what disgusting animal
What
did
kind
this?
Who
of
did this?
monster?
The audacity.
Anyway, guys, I'm reading an ad here, but yes, that's just it's true as me. So I know you guys don't always eat healthy. This is why doctors have created Field of Greens. A delicious glass of Field of Greens daily is like a nutritional armor for your body. Each fruit and vegetable was doctor selected for a specific health benefit. There's a heart health group, lungs and kidney groups, metabolism, and even healthy weight. I drink this when I skate. It legit makes me feel better. And I think it's probably related to, like, I probably need vitamins, you know what I mean? And this has got a lot of them in it. So I'm a big fan. I can enjoy it guilt-free because it's Field of Greens. It's the nutrition my body needs daily, and only Field of Greens makes you this better health promise. Your doctor will notice your improved health or your money back. Wow. Let me get you started with my special discount, everybody. We got 20% off your first order by going to fieldofgreens.com. Use code Tim. Legit, I ain't kidding. We got it right here. I throw a scoop in that with either water. Sometimes I do a coconut water, and it's good. I exercise, almost daily, and so I stick to it. Shout out to Field of Greens for sponsoring the show.
Your girl's breastfeeding right now. Does she like it? Does it work for breastfeeding moms?
I don't think she's taking it. I do think it says something
I was always
like,
under nutriented. I always needed more and more.
I think it says if you're nursing, you got to call your doctor.
Oh, okay.
But to be honest, this is here at the skate facility, and I haven't brought her any. I don't know. Maybe I should ask her if she wants to. I just figure it's like if you're nursing, you have to. She's doing like a specific diet as it is.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe that actually would be pretty good. Anyway, let's grab some of your super chats, my friends, and your Rumble rants, and see what you guys have to say about all of this noise.
Field of Greens. It's got electrolytes, what the body needs.
That's true and correct. Severslate says, "Shout out to angry cops and his crack house. At least you're not moving sandbags without knowing why." What?
I have a crack house. It actually ended up on a deposition that I was in. I bought a crack house, and I've been flipping it, and I'm turning it into a YouTube Airbnb.
Oh, cool.
So, like, me and the unsubscribed guys that I hang out with are going to have, like, items in there from different YouTube channels and stuff like
That's
that.
fun.
Oh, that's cool. Right on. And then you were in it. There was a deposition where you said you had a crack house.
The deposition came up, and the whole investigation was whether or not the ticketing practices, the vehicle and traffic tickets in the city of Buffalo, in my proactive policing unit were discriminatory based on race. And they brought it up, and they said, "You have, I'm there, I'm sworn in, I'm sitting, at the stand," and they're like, "You have a crack house. Describe what is a crack house?" I'm like, "Oh, it's any dilapidated building," and they're trying to make it racial. So they're like, "Are there any crack houses on the east side of Buffalo where black people live?" And I'm like, "There's crack houses everywhere, man." And they're like, "And who likes crack?" And I was like, "Everybody."
It's like that.
Everybody likes crack.
You know that family? Have you seen the Family Guy joke where Peter is smoking crack, and then Brian goes, "Peter, what are you doing?" He's like, "Smoking crack." And he's like, "Where the hell did you get crack?" And he goes, "From Blacks." Yeah, there was a white guy behind Black's Hardware selling it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Black's Hardware. Concrete Haiti says, with AC in the house, Tim, I'll recommend getting Brandon Herrera, Fat Electrician, Habitual Line Crosser, Eli, Donut, Trout, etc. around, or swing by the unsub house. Yes
I
to
love
all of
Habitual
those,
Line Crosser.
but a double yes to Donut Operator because, bro, you got to come skate.
I love Habitual Line Crosser. His content is so great.
We've reached out to Donut too, and I think it's just like everybody's busy, especially if you're doing your own show. But Donut, you got to come skate. Come on. He's a cop who skates. All right, let's grab some more. Mason Wolf, he says, Biden's pardons may be revocable due to how broad they are, not pardoning for a specific crime. I believe that's incorrect.
It's just never been tested. You can make the argument. It literally says you can be pardoned for an offense against the United States. Does that mean you have to specify an offense? We haven't required that. I mean, Jimmy Carter pardoned all the Vietnam War draft dodgers.
Yeah.
And Nixon got a broad pardon. And so it's never been tested because we've never really had a reason to believe that it's possible that a pardon's been issued without the actual authority of the Article 2 executive branch president.
Yeah.
Well, what about universal injunctions too?
Yeah.
I have strong feelings
Unconstitutional.
about injunctions.
Right. District courts have limited jurisdiction. They have limited geographic jurisdiction, limited subject matter jurisdiction, and they act like they have authority over the entire universe.
And
it's not true.
And they keep issuing these rulings.
Injunctions have the second highest standard in the legal profession or in the judicial branch because they're supposed to be narrow in scope and involve extreme specificity, and you have to have all of the elements met.
They're literally described as exceptional remedies.
Exceptional remedies, yes.
And we're seeing them in every one of these lawfare cases.
Right.
Scores and scores and scores of them. Temporary restraining orders, preliminary injunctions being issued. They're supposed to be rare and exceptional.
My favorite was when the judge ruled that the military must admit anyone. Did you see this case?
No.
So
You didn't see that?
No.
So, all right, so here's what happened. Trump said, I'll give you the paraphrasing.
All right.
If you are displaying publicly symptoms of gender dysphoria, you cannot serve. What that basically means is if you are diagnosed with gender dysphoria, but you are not cross-dressing, you are not putting on makeup, you're calling yourself and you're acting normally, you're fine. A judge ruled it was discriminatory and the military must allow all to serve because, quote, all means all. I believe there's over 40 different DSM-5 criteria for not being allowed to enlist in the military.
Yeah.
Like schizophrenia.
Or being dumb. Too dumb.
This universal injunction meant that if you were a paranoid, schizophrenic, paraplegic, you were allowed to enlist and they had to bring you in.
They're called grenades. You wheel them in and
Darwinism.
They're all on the front line.
That's
Yeah.
Darwinism,
you
sir.
drop them in like the 82nd Airborne, except when they land, they detonate. And no VA disability.
If the
Like a
judge,
kamikaze
if the judge,
wheelchair.
okay, if the judge was like some gritty, crazy, flat top guy being like, anybody can join because you send them in and they detonate, would be very different from the woke female being like, it's so mean to not let them in.
Dude, I got kicked off. So I'm a drill sergeant. And every year I go down to Fort Leonard, Missouri, and I turn civilians into soldiers. And this last time I got kicked off the trail being a drill sergeant after 10 days because all the females went to the side.
I knew it was going to be this.
All the females went to the side. I didn't tell them to do that. The senior drill sergeant was going to give them a pep talk because they were all sad, which happens. Everybody gets sad. They catch the sad, and then they want to go, "I should quit." And then we have to motivate them to be like, "You're part of a team." And they go, "We're part of a team." So they go to the side. What's that?
Do the men do this?
Oh, yeah. The men, it happens really quickly, and they bond quickly after. Yeah. For the females, it usually takes like a week or two for them to catch the quit and then get over it. So they go to the side, and while they're on the side about to get this motivational speech, I make them do push-ups because I don't like, they've been unprofessional. They've been smiling at me, giggling, you know, like, drill sergeant. And I go, quit the flirting. If you don't quit the flirting, I'm going to bring the Universal Code of Military Justice on you, the Sexual Harassment and Rape Prevention Program.
Wow.
And if you continue to do this, I'm going to take your money. As in, the United States government is going to take your money because we're going to take your funds, your pay, and say, all right, you know, $500 out of this paycheck because you don't know how to follow the rules, and negatively counsel you, which is well within my right and part of the Sexual Harassment Program. All of this is right. But because I said that, made them do push-ups and walked around them, numerous females were like, when we were doing push-ups, he walked behind us, and sometimes his legs straddled my legs. You're in a formation. I'm literally walking over you to make sure that the ones that are faking doing push-ups and looking around, I call out for being fat and weak, and then you all stand up. And so after that, like 10 or 15 minutes, that's what happened. They all complained, and I said, Drill Sergeant High is a meanie. And the investigation happened. I got completely cleared.
Wait. So then, so someone came to you and told you to get out, or what happened?
So what happened was, and this investigation was put together very poorly, not just like from a detective's point of view, but from a military member that has seen and been a part of these investigations, looking into other things, or seen them from the side. What had happened was a number of troops had made a complaint, like 1 or 2 or 3, right? And normally what happens, the right way, is that the first line leader of the company finds out and they try to solve it. If they can't, they go to the battalion level, which is the next level up. And if they can't, they go to the 3rd level, which is brigade. What happened was it went whoop right to brigade, and the brigade representative came down, had a group meeting with all the kids, and says, who here feels like Drill Sergeant High said something mean to you? And they all went, and so then that's what happened. It turned into a massive bitch session.
What's the guy's name? You know I'm talking about. The drill sergeant. The drill sergeant. Arlie Ermy. Arlie Ermy. We needed him. I love that. You know what I wanted to hear?
What's that?
I wish your story was something different, where they came down and said, which one of you feel that Drill Sergeant High said something mean? And they raised their hand, get on the ground now! And just doubled the push-ups.
That is, once the senior drill sergeant or the investigator came up to me and said, you know, hey, this is what happened. It's unfounded. What you did was correct, and they're just being a bunch of babies. Then, I mean, you can't really say because you made a complaint, I'm going to smoke you. But I would find a reason.
You should be able to.
Yeah, I don't see why not. You wasted everybody's time. You made a false allegation.
If you complain and it's false, then we should say, oh, so this allegation is false and unfounded? Okay, 50 push-ups.
Yes, Tim, but if we hold people accountable for lying, what about the real people who want to say they could be affected in some way?
It was their truth.
It was their truth, Tim.
So
and in the Army, we all care about individual freedoms.
This was during the Biden administration, I'd imagine?
Holy shit, how did you know?
Well, I think, I'm hoping what I hear about Hegseth has been true and correct, and the moves he's making have been good.
I had somebody reach out from Military Times, and they wanted to ask me about the Hegseth and what the military thinks of the Hegseth, and they tried to say the signal issue, which is an issue, but like they tried to make it seem like it was larger than what it was, and said, we want your point of view. The memosphere in the military, which is fairly large and a very good way of spreading information, it really doesn't like Hegseth. And I was like, really? Like, yeah, we want to talk to you about all these meme pages and stuff like that, and the memes about them. And I'm like, all right, well, send me some of these meme pages and let me see what they're all about. You know, I'm in that sphere. I know who's got the voice, you know. And he sent me like 3 memes, one of which is from an account that likes Hegseth, but, you know, it's low-hanging fruit to pick on him for the signal thing.
Yeah.
And like the other 2 examples were like the accounts with like 1,500 followers. And I was like, well, I don't really see what you're saying, but I'll gladly listen to you. Well, that wasn't the answer he wanted.
Yeah.
He's never called me again.
I'm hoping the woke stuff's getting pushed back. My question for you is, what do these women do?
So I did engineer OSIT, which is one station unit training. So Combat Arms does OSIT, where basic training and their job training are together. They stay in the same barracks with the same drill sergeants the entire time. They don't move, which is mainly Combat Arms. So as an engineer, like we'll go with combat engineers, your job is to remove obstacles and close distance with the enemy and kill them. And your primary...
women?
What's that?
These women are supposed to do this?
Correct. And you have to carry cratering charges and C4 and other explosives.
Why? Honest question. How come everyone I know who tells me a story out of basic says exactly what you said about the women? Is it like, and I mean this sincerely, I'm not trying to drag women. In your experience, do women tend to behave that way in basic training?
Well, Tim, this might shock a lot of people, but men and women are different. And sometimes
there is a female nature.
But this is correct and understandable, but does that mean the difference includes whinging?
What whinging? Good word. I don't know what that means. Is
Complaining.
complaining?
Yeah.
I just showed my arminess because I don't know your big words. Females are more sensitive. When I say that, I mean in the highs and the lows. If you say something negative, they take it to heart much deeper than a male trainee that's 17 years old. However, if you give positive reinforcement and you build them up, they really support each other better than men. At some points, like they'll group together and try to be like a unit a little bit faster. Men, you'll get a lot more like headbutting and machismo, which creates competition and is good in its own way.
What I've heard is that in the initial stages of basic, the men are all fighting.
Yes.
But by the end, they figured out who's in charge.
Oh, not even by the end. Like after the 3 weeks, 4 weeks at the most, they've kind of understood the hierarchy is we're in charge and we will pick who's going to lead you, and then they will follow them because of my authority.
I've heard that for women, when they start, they're very nice to each other, but by the end, they're catty and cliquish.
Yes.
Because for men, the hierarchy is explicit and desirable and a valuable trait. For the women, they hide. They want to pretend there is no hierarchy. They know there is. Every woman walks into the room and knows if there's a hotter chick than her in the room.
Right.
But they pretend that's not. That's why they, on these shows, they say, oh, I'm a 10, I'm a 10, I'm a 10. You're a 10, we're all 10s. Obviously, it's not true. 10s are 1 in a million. But they'll say it as if they mean it, and they mean it in an emotional sense.
Let's grab some more of your guys' chats. AK Archer says, prosecute Fauci. Also, I am nominating Brandon Herrera and Richard High for Director of the ATF and Deputy Director of the ATF, respectively. Hey, AC, can you say Trunnion 3 times for me? Love the show, guys.
Oh, God. Brandon Herrera makes weapons, and he says Trunnion 1,000,000 times over. And I intentionally psyoped him in my video saying Trunnion and acting like I was coming. And every time he says Trunnion now, he giggles and can't get through it the first time. I
did enjoy Phil shared his forced reset trigger video. I was very much a fan.
I haven't seen that one yet.
It was a small clip that I watched, but it basically is a machine gun, not a machine gun. You know what I mean?
It's almost like if you try to take away our rights, we'll find a way to circumvent them.
I love how it's a loophole. So for those that don't know what that is, I'm not a gun expert or anything, but basically, you have to. It was one trigger pull, one round.
Right. Correct.
Otherwise, it's automated. And so what happens is after it fires, it resets the trigger by force with the return of the bolt. So if you hold your finger down, your finger's being pushed forward and then pulling the trigger back just by holding onto it. So it's like a machine gun. It's not going to be a bump stock. It's going to be a force reset trigger. They're going to keep trying to make the laws. And what are they going to end up trying to do? Like if more than 3 bullets leave the barrel within a certain amount of time, it's a machine gun now?
Yeah, but you can't even do that
Right,
because you've got speed shooters that
Exactly.
are exceptional at shooting.
How about they just abolish all of this BS? Actually, as a cop, how would you feel about that? Like if they abolished NFA, all gun control, and people could have guns and machine guns, do you have a concern about that as a cop?
I'm a constitutionalist. I like it. The problem will sort itself out. Good people will be armed. Bad people won't. You will be employed for the rest of your life easily because people will, make asses out of themselves.
Nothing will change for bad people. These people who have switches on their Glocks illegally, they're already doing all the illegal things.
Yes.
They're not obeying the gun laws. It's like when people talk about background checks. I'm like, we should have universal background checks. We should have no background checks.
We already have background checks.
Bad guys don't buy their guns through a background check.
Right.
They send their girlfriend into the gun store. They buy it out of the trunk of a car.
Who? Where? I've never. Sir, Atlanta is not a hotbed for all the firearms that come into my city. I'll have you know that.
Do you ever get in trouble for like, 'cause you're in the military and you're a cop, and you're doing a show where you're,
Oh, yeah.
being explicit and transparent.
Andrew Cuomo had someone in his office that had to watch every single one of my videos.
Oh, nice.
I have a permanent negative check mark on my career because of Andrew Cuomo, because of Bill de Blasio.
Well, Bill de Blasio was a
Piece of shit.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. A coward.
Well,
he was horrible,
So
horrible.
I imagine
You
there are a
think
lot of
Cuomo's
people
gonna win?
who want to be stopped by you or pulled over or whatever it is you're doing. They're like, oh, that'd be so cool.
I'm pretty easy going. I've seen a lot of crazy shit. So, like, pulling somebody over for speeding, it's like it's an option for me. It's a time for me to talk to you. Hey, how you doing? What you doing? Where you going? Crashy, And then as they're cool and we have a
people
good
crashy?
rapport, you're fine.
Call people crashy.
If they crash,
yeah.
Yeah.
it's like the Family Guy thing. Oh, I've quoted
What do you call people that speed, or like what do you call people that are
weirdos.
okay?
I go, hey, weirdo, why are you going so fast? And then they look at me like I've got two heads, and I'm like, this is gonna be good.
Let's grab some more. What do you have? St. Miles says, I don't think the guests are catching the point Tim is making. The victim and situation has brought illumination on the national stage of the gang's activity and how a national threat the gang is.
No, I caught that.
To a degree, yeah. There was a chat that I think someone made. Let me see if I can find it. It's always really high. Here we go. Here's a couple that I want to read. Michelle Heim says, I'm an abuse survivor, and I can tell you we can maintain contact when we have an order for protection because we are in fear of our lives due to threats still being made. I married my first husband because of it. You can maintain contact when you have an order of protection?
If there's custody disputes, so if there's children in place,
I see, right.
then the orders of protection will specifically state that they are not allowed to have like any negative contact with one another, or sometimes zero contact with one another, unless it is specifically for child care or some other things. And sometimes, in heavier cases, it's a representative of the family justice system or family courts in New York would have to be there.
Yeah, in Maryland we have conditional. We have peace orders and protective orders too that do different things. And if there's kids involved, they can be conditional in the ways that they implement them.
Jennifer K says, Tim, I think you're right about the wife of Abrego Garcia being coerced by MS-13. Once they have Garcia, they can use that as leverage to get info about MS-13. Check to see if he was married to Jen when previously arrested. Interesting. Well, is that a consideration? Like, if she goes to the police and says he beat me, so they say, okay, we're going to pick him up. Could MS-13 be concerned he'll turn informant or even accidentally give up information on him?
They could be concerned. I'm not going to lie, though. Like, using confidential informants, it's fairly safe. The only time that like a confidential informant really gets burned is when they burn themselves. The first thing that we tell them is shut up. Don't tell anybody, including your wife or girlfriend.
Do you normally just talk to him on the phone?
And a lot of it's in person. And if you talk to them on the phone, I mean, yeah, you can talk to them on the phone.
Isn't there any risk of them being found out if they're talking to you in person?
Normally, they'll text you first. Well, so before I was in SVU, I worked with the FBI Safe Streets program, which is anti-gang. And so when I had confidential informants, the way that we would talk with one another is literally via cell phone. They had a cell phone. They'd shoot me a text. If it was Text Now app or if it was iMessage or whatever, they'd shoot me a text and just save me under a different name. They're not going to say,
right.
Special agent attached to the FBI, Detective Richard High, messaging me,
But you hide in plain sight. Then when they look and they're like, special agent FBI, I'd be like, it's a joke for my buddy, man.
Oh, yeah.
I'll go, oh, it makes sense.
I've had guys like have me saved in their phone as like 007, boy, dude, unk.
All right. What we got going here? Michelle Heim says, I see something happening globally that got exposed when Trump was elected. He's not part of the monarchical lineage and isn't supposed to be president. It's why they keep trying to erase both terms. He's breaking their machine.
That's right, yeah.
That's the liberal economic order. Trump, when he went after USAID, I think if you look at all of Trump's actions, even with foreign policy, he's basically saying we will destroy the liberal economic order.
Correct.
And
the whole culture. I mean, that's why he's going after the universities, too.
Right. And so for those who are not familiar, simple version, after World War II, a bunch of world leaders got together and said, let's create a conspiracy to control world affairs using international banking. And Trump is destroying it. So The NGOs are a process of that, the funding of NGOs, the lawyers who work in and around D.C., the International Monetary Fund, the Bank of International Settlements, the SWIFT payment system. All of this is, we're going to control you through debt and financing. And Trump is like, break it.
And all these independent agencies that have no legitimacy under our constitutional order, including the Federal Reserve, including the CIA, they're answerable to nobody. Our founders didn't create an Article 4 branch of government called independent agencies.
And I want to just make sure this is available to all of our listeners. This is the website called education.cfr.org. This is the Council on Foreign Relations. And this is the NGO breaking down for you what is the liberal world order. Explore the organizations and agreements that have promoted global peace and prosperity since the end of World War II, as well as the challenges that the liberal world order now faces in this video. In the, I believe it was the late 80s, early 90s, George H.W. Bush, making a reference to the liberal world order, said, "We can now begin to see a new world order forming," which birthed the phrase New World Order. The media then claimed it was a conspiracy to say that there were powerful world leaders seeking to control the globe. What George H.W. Bush was saying was quite literally, this has existed since the 50s. It exists today, and it's becoming something different. It is not a conspiracy theory. It is real. And it's right here on the CFR's website. You can just read about it. That's what they do. Trump is basically gutting all the mechanisms of the liberal world order. And I love it. I think it's great. Anyway, let's go. We had a good funny one. Let me grab that. Call for Prez says, sending some buffalo love to everybody, especially angry cops. Would love to discuss the future of cannabis and festivals in Western New York with someone in law enforcement. Big buffalo love. Is that what you guys say up there?
It's like a
Buffalo?
thing. Yeah, buffalo. It's buffalo.
Is it like, do they have like a big wing festival up there? Is like as a big
Oh yeah, we have Wing Fest.
Oh,
I
so
want to go.
yeah.
It's
So
good.
I love wings.
My brother-in-law's from Buffalo.
I have a fire truck that I turned into a tailgating mobile that I take first responders and veterans out.
Oh, that's
And
fun.
You can climb on the back. It's a big dance floor, speakers, bar.
Is it like a modern one or like a vintage style?
I have three. So I've got a vintage one, like a early '90s one,
That's
which
cool.
is our
3
flagship.
fire trucks?
What's that?
Where do you put 3 fire trucks?
Yeah, pole barns. And one of them's parked in my buddy's driveway.
Oh, man.
That's awesome.
All right, we'll grab some more chats here. We got a couple more minutes. It's jumping on me. Come on, YouTube. Reese Mendocino says, Tiffany has a point. As a young person, I am watching every day how young men are becoming more and more upset and just want to set the world on fire.
Yeah.
Indeed, but I would say the statistics bear out that more and more young men are becoming Christians, which is, I don't think there are a lot of Christians that are simultaneously also wanting to destroy everything. I think there's probably 2 distinct reactions. But I would say, I understand what you're saying, and I agree that a lot of young people are becoming upset, but I don't think it's the majority.
They don't want to destroy everything. They want to destroy
No,
the
they-
binds on them.
They want to destroy the shackles that are dragging them down. And it's not like this is not like they're not motivated. They're working harder than any generation ever has. They all have 5 side hustles and a full-time job. Double employment is a current thing right now, and they can't pay their bills. They're 33 and have 6 roommates. Okay? Like it's not, they don't have hope. And we can't replace them in the population because they can't afford to get married or have kids. It's going to make it worse and worse. And at the same time, with as much wealth consolidation as we have, all that wealth consolidation, if you have $1 billion, how much are you spending a week? Gary Stevenson's an economist. He talks about this a lot too.
Probably the same as I'm spending now.
Right? Like if you're a billionaire, maybe you spend $50,000 a week. Maybe you spend $100,000 a week. Let's say you spend $1 million a week. Your compound interest is still doubling and tripling that constantly.
I want to say actually, it is possible to spend $1 million a week, but it's extremely difficult to spend $1 million a week.
And if you are spending it, you're not spending it with small businesses in the middle class. It's just getting handed off to another billionaire.
So
we're not reinvesting in the places where we need it, and they're hopeless.
The way you spend $1 million a week reasonably and legitimately is like having, I don't know, what would you have?
Diddy party.
500 employees at a company. So you've got $1 million in your account. You have 500 employees at your company doing something for you. You're going to pay those labor costs. The idea that there was, I think, did Mr. Beast do this? Something like you've got to spend $10 million, like, or I don't know if it was Mr. Beast.
Probably $1 million.
Right, but
That
it's
sounds like a
actually,
Beast thing.
and it has to be legitimate. It can't be gratuity. And the question is, how would you actually spend that money? And you can't buy property. It's like buying good services that are available to a consumer. How do you spend $1 million in a week? It's a lot of people are like, go to a fancy restaurant. Okay, fancy restaurant's going to be, I don't know, for you and the missus, $700, $800, depending on how fancy. Some places you can get upwards of $5,000. If you really want to push it, go to Nusret and spend $5,000 on some golden steaks. Come on, keep going. $995,000 left to go.
They're not, though. They're just not.
No one's spending that much money.
It's all so concentrated, and money is a finite resource. I mean, I know we love to print it, but it is a finite resource. And the more it is consolidated, the more it reconstitutes and compounds there. And that has to come from somewhere.
Well, that actually
coming
shows it's
from the working class.
That actually shows it's not finite. Compounding interest, the modern monetary system is not finite. It's actually the opposite. That's why it's inflationary.
I understand that we can print it. I understand it is inflationary.
But the interest of the money you're generating, the money is created upon issuance of debt, meaning that the banks aren't making money instantly.
When rich people have money and they're the only ones that have it, the only things they really have to spend it on after a certain point is buying up more companies, which leads to more consolidation.
I'm pretty sure I could spend about $500,000 in about 5 hours on 57th and Madison.
That sounds wonderful. Again, they're not doing it. And if they are doing it, they're not doing it where it can make a difference for the people that need it right now.
When you see a big expense, it's like, I don't know, if you have 10 people in Vegas and you request like private top tier penthouse dining.
Sure.
And you're going to get a $300,000 bill. It's possible to do, right? But in normal day to day, buying the best of the best, buying the best clothes, even buying cars, it's relatively difficult.
Mark Zuckerberg's yacht costs like $13 million a month to maintain. His sub yacht is another $3 million.
That's meaningless.
Those millions are not going to help the working class.
Sure.
We have to find a way to get money back into the working class.
How is it not helping the working class?
Yeah, I was gonna say it doesn't, like, you've got the people that are working the ships.
And
you have
all
a
the
very
ancillary
small
services.
amount of people working the ships. Most of the corporations that service yachts are huge, giant multinational corporations.
That's not true.
That are all okay.
When most yacht usage is daily rentals and they're relatively cheap. So
Mark Zuckerberg is not renting out his yacht.
He sure isn't, but the companies that do like repairs and stuff, it's mostly small businesses. So we've got Annapolis, hour and a half, 2 hours away.
Yeah, the yacht show's this week. I'm going.
Yeah, you just rent $1,000, you rent a yacht, and you got it for the day. Maybe depending on the size, if you want like so most of the yachts are just consignment.
I don't want to get bogged down in like this one. I'm just saying, like, if you're spending $300 million on a yacht and then the service yacht, which is another $200 or $140 million, and then you're servicing it with $30 million a month in international waters, wherever it's going. My point is they're not going to Iowa and spending it with a bunch of farmers, or like, we need the working class to have money come back into the working class, and it's not happening.
Well, so with like yacht service, like any other service, you're going to have ancillary services. You're going to have a guy who makes $20 an hour cleaning. You're going to have crew that serve food. You're going to have general repairs.
Yes, he has a 26-person crew. That is true.
Right, but like
for $300 million.
The truth is the world is made for poor. The world is made for the poor is the saying. People have this perception that the world is made for the wealthy, and it's literally not, because there's very few of them. So even the highest and most expensive things are not as expensive as people think they are. Certainly, there are tricks. Certainly, we hear about on TV the Kardashians and the lifestyle they have. But usually, luxury that as we perceive it is fake luxury, intending to appear like it's for wealthy people.
Well, I can't help but wonder how much wealthier Americans will be if they're not competing for scarce resources like housing, jobs, healthcare, education, with 100 million illegal migrants in the country. Indeed.
I do want to say, the important thing on wealth inequality is the two key issues are the most important is the perception, not the function. If poor people feel that there are people who live better than them, whether it's true or not, is when you get revolt. And the real concern with wealth inequality is power consolidation, not luxury. So the idea that like a billionaire has like Elon Musk, 400 billion or whatever, literally means nothing.
No, it's just stocks and stuff.
The fact, even if he had 400 billion in the bank in cash, meaningless. The worst thing in the world would be if he dumped that into the market, because it would cause hyperinflation overnight, and that's a bad thing. The real issue is that the wealth inequality creates a group of people with power over laws and regulations.
Yes.
And it consolidates power in that regard. But among the general people, wealth inequality functionally means nothing. The buying power of the dollar is based upon the economy, which is the people's willingness to buy and trade with each other. If Elon Musk had $500 billion in cash in the bank, it doesn't, and he doesn't spend it, nothing happens. Nothing changes. The guy still is going to spend money with his bakery. There's the rate of exchange is based on the amount of goods being produced, the amount of services being rendered for that production, and you can fall into a depression even if there's a factory ready to work, there's a farm with food, the economy stops. It's basically a function of, can people exchange with each other like in a well-oiled machine? A billionaire having money doesn't change or have any effect on that. If the billionaire dumps his money in Iowa and just starts giving out millions of dollars, it will create massive waves, which can lead to hyperinflation and destabilize national economies.
I agree with everything you said almost on the second part, but where you said revolt happens when people perceive people to have a better situation than them. No, revolt happens when no matter how hard people work, they have no way to achieve a basic standard of living, which is where we are right now.
Define standard of living.
A standard of living is putting food on your table and a roof over your head and basic clothes from a thrift store on your kid's back. They can't do it right now.
Well, they can do that in Cuba, and they're far more poor than us.
Right. So this is the point.
But if people believe they have no method to achieve a basic standard of living, no matter how, that's the reality though. This isn't a belief. That is the reality.
America has fat homeless people. The bigger concern is that Gen Z is cut out from the market. So we have a generation coming into adulthood who can't buy houses.
And millennials, half of them.
Indeed.
If they didn't get in at exactly the right line in the sand, they have no path.
But this is not wealth inequality. It's generational disparity. So the boomers, but we're not talking about, when we refer to wealth disparity, we're talking about oligopoly. We're talking about Ukraine. We're talking about like nations that end up in civil war and revolt, where you've got a singular class of millionaires and billionaires that own everything. And the people are like, in Ukraine, for instance, before the war, it was a handful of like 16 people that literally owned all property. And the crazy thing was a two-bedroom condo in Kiev, where the average income was $400 a month, was $300,000 US. No one who worked in Kiev could afford to buy that. Who owned it? The oligarchs. Few people. That is what people typically refer to as wealth inequality that leads to revolt, because you can see everybody, these small group of people literally own everything and there's no movement and you'll never be able to afford it. In the United States, we have something similar but still different. Boomers own 70% of boomers own homes. And I think Gen X is high 60s, millennials are half, and Gen Z is like nothing. So this system, what we're experiencing right now, is largely that boomers own all the properties. Yep. And
and corporations, which is a huge problem. True. They're acquiring up to 46% in most major metropolitan areas right now.
The issue for boomers is, if you own the house, just rent it out. And so Gen Z can't afford it, because a boomer can buy a house from another boomer. And I'm not blaming all boomers, because it's not literally not all. It's largely wealthier, older folks. But boomers own 60% of all corporate equities. Gen X owns like 20. Millennials own like 6. And Gen Z owns none.
None. They own debt. That's all they own. And so do most of the millennials.
So what's going to happen is, and I know we're going over, I'll say this. When boomers start dying, we are going to see a massive wealth crash in this country. The government's going to have to issue a bailout of some sort. It's going to be bonkers.
How would that crash happen?
So boomers own multiple properties.
Yeah.
Right now, there's a house not too far away from here that a few years ago, 4 years ago, was $200,000. It's $500 now, and it's because people will pay it.
Yeah.
So a boomer owns a home and they die. That home is then given to their millennial or Gen Z children. Boomers are going to die at 79. That means their child will be 60 or 50, 57.
Yeah, they'll be the Gen Xers.
57-year-old millennial is going to be like, I'm not moving back to northern Maine where my parents lived. So they'll tell their lawyer, put it on the market. The lawyer will put it on the market and say, when your parents owned it, the estimate was $1.2 million, right? Because this is going to be in 20 years. Who can afford $1.2 million?
Corporations.
Yes. So one of two things will happen. the corporations will come in and just buy it because they're getting free Fed money.
Yep.
Or the crash happens when the guy who owns it says, put it on the market for 1.2. A week later, the agent says, not a single inquiry. And then put it up at 1. I don't care. I don't want to live there. I just want the money. Not a single inquiry. Okay, well, can we 900? Not a single inquiry. 6. We're getting some interest from corporations. Younger generations aren't going to buy them, and the prices are going to get slashed because the corporations will know, I don't have to pay 1.2 for this. Gen Z, who's now in their 40s, can only afford a $300,000 house. So if it's selling for 1.2, I can let it fall to 3, and then I can offer 325 and buy it out from the Gen Z guy. Right now, boomers are trading in properties based upon the wealth they hold. But the wealth they hold is largely in real estate and corporate equities. When they die and those corporate equities and assets are transferred to millennials, the wealth of these is based on the perception that someone will be willing to pay for it and the offers will exist. But because millennials and Gen Z can't afford to buy it, no one's going to put an offer on these properties, and they're going to have to keep dropping the value of them until they can find someone who actually has the cash to buy it.
Do you think
That's
Right?
That's something that was happening with homes in golf course communities.
I was going to ask about Canada because I know that Canada's housing
Canada
market
has
is
a
Canada's
four
housing
times.
market is a train wreck.
It's
a really
An absolute,
bad
but
crisis.
right now, with the current trajectory of private equity and real estate investment trust acquisition of houses in major metropolitan areas, in areas like Atlanta, over the last 3 years, they were acquiring as much as 44% of all inventory. Right now, systematically, it's between 11 and 15% throughout the United States. But if their current acquisition trajectory continues, by 2032, they could own as much as 61% of all of the homes in some metropolitan areas if they keep acquiring at this, and almost everywhere by 2040.
Do you think that's going to push people out of the cities and back into suburbia and
No, they're going to buy it everywhere.
rural areas?
The point is they're creating a renting class. They're creating a feudal class.
The
Renters, you will own nothing and be happy class.
But that's going to be an instant revolt.
It is become that's the result that's revolt that's happening
why-
now. That's not an instant revolt. It's a slow boil that is boiling.
Well, I
This kind of thing is
left New
common
York so I
in
could buy a
California.
house.
I
It's
mean,
common everywhere
I've
right
worked
now.
on
live in
cases
the
in
city.
California where they have
lived in
a
Brooklyn.
6,000 square foot house, but
Now I live
they
out
got
here.
7 families living in the house. Each family gets a bedroom.
Wow.
It's
My friends,
horrifying.
we do have to go.
That seems bad.
We have a hard stop because we have construction. But guys, it's been a lot of fun. Smash the like button, share the show with everyone you know. You can follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. Angry Cops. Do you want to shout anything out?
Just Unsub Podcast, which I'm on, and my YouTube channel, which is Angry Cops.
Right on.
What's your podcast?
Unsub Podcast. It's my friend's podcast, but I frequent it.
Okay.
Everybody follow me at X and Instagram at The Vino Mom, on TikTok and YouTube at Tiffany Cianci. And if any of you guys want to come, we are going to, on the 22nd, that's next Tuesday at 9 a.m. in Frederick County Circuit Court. We're going into court to fight a private equity firm that's hurting a bunch of small businesses, and we'd love to have a bunch of people turn out. So 9 a.m. Frederick County Circuit Court in Frederick County, Maryland on Tuesday the 22nd.
Attorney Andrew Branca, don't forget to get your free copy of the book that makes you hard to convict, keeps you hard all year long. At lawofselfdefense.com/Tim. It's free. Just cover the cost of shipping it to you. lawofselfdefense.com/Tim.
Get hard. Stay hard.
That hard to say. Can't do that to a Las Vegas.
That's hard. That's hard to follow. I'm Libby Evans. I'm with the Post Millennial. You can check out what we're doing at thepostmillennial.com and humanevents.com. You can follow me on X. You can subscribe to my daily newsletter, thepostmillennial.com/Libby. And if you were admiring the map behind Tiffany, the Trump map that was designed by my colleague and friend Jack Posobiec, and you could pick up your own copy at thetrumpmap.com.
Right on. All right, everybody. I'm back tomorrow, actually. Much to the chagrin of my wife. I will be working in the morning, and it'll be fun. So I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for hanging out, and see you then.